Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to call this Bloomington City Council meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, January 29th, 2024. Thank you to everyone joining us here in council chambers. Thanks to everybody watching at home. We will start our meeting as we always do. If you're able to, please stand, remove your caps, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, welcome and thanks for joining us this evening. Council, our first order of business is to approve tonight's agenda, and it's a beefy one tonight. Item 2 are introductory items. We're going to be introduced to a number of new employees from 3 different Bloomington City departments, and we have a proclamation recognizing Black History Month tonight. Under our consent business, Councilmember D'Alessandro has consent, and we have 25 items on consent tonight. Under item 4 are hearings, resolutions, and ordinances. We have 2 public hearings and 2 public comment opportunities. Item 4.1 is a public hearing to approve the feasibility report and order pavement management program park trail improvement projects. Item 4.2 is a second public hearing regarding the vacation of public utilities and drainage easements and so on. Item 4.3 is our first opportunity for public comment. That is on our electric vehicle infrastructure plan. And item 4.4, our second opportunity for public comment, this regarding a resolution to accept the Penn Lake Management Framework. Under our organizational business, we've got a number of things to talk about. Item 5.1 is the recommendations regarding our cultural arts support grants funding revision. Item 5.2 is conveyance of Hyland Greens Golf Course to Three Rivers Park District. We'll be having that discussion. Item 5.3, speed limits on larger roadways. Item 5.4, our 2024 legislative policies. Item 5.5, the official appointment of our new council secretary. And we'll wrap up this evening, as we always do. Item 5.6 is our city council policy and issue update. Council, any additions, subtractions, corrections to tonight's agenda as stated? Hearing none, I would move tonight's agenda as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilmember Lohman to accept tonight's agenda as stated. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I'll take that opportunity to note that Councilmember Carter is not with us this evening. She is out of town. We will move on to item 2 in our agenda, our introductory items, and we'll start with our introduction of new employees. As I said, I think we're going to be meeting folks from 3 different departments, administration, community development, and I don't know who else. Maybe it's only 2 departments, but we have Christina Scipione, our city clerk, here, and I know Mike Sable will be introducing some folks, and I've also got Carla Henderson on the list. Very good. Ms. Scipione, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be here tonight to introduce 3 new part-time licensing specialists that are in the city clerk's office. These folks are our friendly faces for the business community as they come in to get licenses and permits, and for our passport customers as well. They've all started toward the end of December, and it's been fabulous. They're great additions to the team, bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and we're super excited to have them on board. So to start off, I'll introduce Steve Karfus. Steve joins us from the mortgage industry. He enjoys sports, movies, and traveling, and speaks fluent Greek. And he has a great sense of humor and brings a lot of fun to our office, which you didn't tell me to say, but I had to add because it's true. Next, we have LaTanya Noble. She's a seasoned executive with 20 years of experience leading the Minnesota People of Color LGBTB Pride organization. She's dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion, and she also has a background in management roles with the retail and hospitality industries, which is great when you're trying to license folks, you understand where they're coming from, right? And then we have Ann Pliego, who has a lot of experience already serving our community. She has worked with the Hennepin County Library System for 17 years, and we're excited to have her now on the city side of government. And Ann told me she's really enjoying her new position, and mostly because everybody is so nice here in Bloomington. So I didn't want to put them on the spot and have them all have to speak, but we do want to make sure to say welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Well, good evening to all of you. Welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening. Thanks for taking the time, and welcome aboard. I hope the first few weeks here have been good. Thanks for bringing the good weather with you. We'll give you credit for that. Make it worthwhile. But appreciate it, and appreciate you being the face, because I know that you are a front-facing threesome, and you'll be involved with the community quite a bit. So looking forward to your interactions with the community, and looking forward to seeing you here around City Hall. So welcome aboard. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Mr. Sable.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. Mike Sable, Assistant City Manager. And it's my pleasure to introduce, I've got 3 new hires in the admin department and HR. I'm going to start with Safa Mercer, who we maybe have already met or will certainly meet later today. She's a graduate of the University of Minnesota with a degree in sociology and criminology and deviance. She's worked in both private and public sectors in many capacities, ranging from probation officer, guardian ad litem, and later as a senior court clerk for the Minnesota Judicial Branch in Dakota County for 8 years. She left the county to work for a private sector position in litigation, paralegal, and family law practice, and was later recruited by Kennedy and Graven, who was a very common customer for us, and as a municipal and civil litigation paralegal. Outside of work, she enjoys golfing, bike riding, and entertaining friends and family. So I want to introduce Safa Mercer.
Hi, it's nice to meet all of you, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. for the
Welcome aboard.
opportunity. I'm
Welcome
excited.
aboard. We'll see you again later, so thank you.
She has front row seating. Next, I want to introduce Steve Barrett. Steve comes to us with 25 years of human resources experience in local government, K-12, and higher education, with 14 years of leadership experience focused on really aligning HR practices to organizational goals and really creating a more welcoming and inclusive work environment. In his spare time, he likes to travel and paint and spend time with his wife, Denise, and 9-year-old twins, Presley and Paxton. Steve Barrett.
Welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. The staff here have been so welcoming and gracious. It's a wonderful HR department, and I'm really excited about this opportunity. Thank you.
Good, and we're very glad to have you. It's a big responsibility, HR, and an organization this size, so welcome aboard. Thank you.
Speaking of HR and an organization of this size, it's my honor to introduce Yvonne Tolman, who is an HR business partner with the City of Bloomington, both a BS and a master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. Has a comprehensive professional experience spanning 12 years within human resources, predominantly in the public sector, in addition to professional pursuits, personal fulfillment from playing football for the Minnesota Vixen, and spending quality time with 2 canine companions. And Yvonne has been with us for a while, and I have neglected to bring her forward just because it was my mistake. But she has been just a joy to work with and has really fostered partnerships with her teams, and they love having her as a business partner. And so, sorry for being late, but the floor is yours.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Better late than never. No, I have enjoyed my 10 months here so far. I feel like it's a good fit, and I'm always interested in learning more about how the city works, so I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Fabulous. What positions do you play with the Vixen?
The last couple of years, I played on the D line. They moved me to the O line this year, so I think I'll be a guard
Very
on the
good.
D line or on the O line this year.
Good.
So we'll see how it
Well,
goes.
welcome. Thank you. Welcome to the 3 of you, and look forward to seeing all of you around City Hall in the very near future. Thanks much.
All right, so I'm going to bring us home. So Carla Henderson from the Community Development Department. I want to first introduce Catherine Murray. So you'll be pleased to know she is joining our creative placemaking. Part of BTT and what we heard in the community is expand creative placemaking citywide. So Catherine started November 20th as the creative placemaking specialist in the Port Authority Division, supporting Alejandra. Her initial project focus has been taking on art box installations, both in the South Loop and the first attempts at taking creative placemaking programming citywide. She is enjoying encompassing her experience and compassion for community development and the arts in her new role. Catherine spends her spare time with her family, either here in the cities or up north at the family cabin. So here's Catherine Murray.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm excited for the work that we're doing already. And I hope to see you at the celebration for the new community garden.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome.
All right, Miss Keely Jackson. When Faith met her, she was like long lost cousin, Miss Jackson. So Miss Jackson began as a program specialist too on October 16th in the HRA division, working in residential and development services. She is from Minnesota and loves to travel. She enjoys sports, socializing, and spending time with family and friends, and is known to try out new recipes and inviting people over to taste test. And so here's Keely Jackson.
Good evening.
All, thank you, and hope to work with you soon.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks for being here tonight.
And Fadil Sheikh Mohammed. So he started on December 4th as a program specialist too in the HRA division. Fadil came from Somalia to Minnesota 23 years ago and currently lives in Edina. We won't hold that against him. With over 19 years of successful experience in both the profit and nonprofit sectors, he has experience in leasing management, compliance specialist, academic consultation, customer service, community engagement, and property management, both market rate and affordable housing. He received his bachelor's degree in International Relations from Metropolitan State University and a master's degree in management from St. Mary's University of Minnesota. Fadil's background has taught him the importance of time management and given him the ability to adapt to unexpected daily challenges. When he isn't working, Fadil enjoys reading history books, articles, and spending time with his family and friends.
Good evening, Fadil. Welcome.
Thank you, Carla, for the nice words. I'm glad to be here. I'm hoping to work with you well. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, next is Elliot Brooks. Elliot began as the Planning Office Support Specialist on December 4th. He is a lifelong Twin Cities resident and received his bachelor's degree from the U of M with majors in psychology and anthropology. He worked most recently for the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, and in his free time, Elliot enjoys gardening and planning for his upcoming wedding in the next year to his fiancée.
Welcome, Elliot.
Thank you, Council. I'm so happy to have gotten this opportunity, and I am looking forward to learning a lot in the planning division. There's a lot to learn, and I'm just happy to be serving my community. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to have you here.
Jesse? Joel Aldridge started as a plumbing inspector for the B&I team on October 16th. He grew up in Buffalo, Minnesota on a farm and began his residential plumbing career with Plymouth Plumbing from 1991 to 2001, then gained 20 years of commercial and industrial plumbing experience when he worked as a journeyman and foreman. About 3 years ago, he decided he wanted to become an inspector and was looking for the right opportunity. And when the city of Bloomington posted a job as plumbing inspector, he applied. He loves his job here and says the employees are very accommodating and friendly. He and his wife like to travel, try new restaurants, spend time with friends, and their little dog, Lily, in their free time.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to come and work here. With everybody else, it's been a real, just a great opportunity. Everybody's so friendly, and I'm really looking forward down the road here to keep with it.
Good. Well, thank you. Glad to have you here. And Jamie said he likes your haircut, so well done.
Same beautician. All right, Jesse Denzer started as a plumbing inspector on October 23rd, originally from Lakeville. Jesse now lives in Farmington with his wife, daughter, and 2 dogs. In their free time, Jesse and his wife like to spend time on the lake when it's warm enough, fishing, swimming, and jet skiing. Jesse also likes going for walks to nearby parks, looking for newer, bigger slides with his 2-year-old, and spending time with extended family. A fun fact about Jesse is that he really enjoys musky fishing.
Yep.
I don't even know what that is.
Have fun. First off, I just want to thank everybody here. You guys have built a great team, Carla, and all you guys. I mean, everybody's very nice and very friendly, and it's just great to come to work every day. The field I came from, some days it wasn't a joy to come. And everybody really does their job. I mean, they really go above and beyond for the customer. Everybody I've ever met so far for the city of Bloomington, they work really hard to make sure the customers are happy. So thank you guys very much for the opportunity. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight.
All right, and closing us out this evening, last but certainly not least, is Ong Tao. Ong started her position with the HRA as the Office Support Specialist on October 30th. She's originally from Northern California and currently resides in St. Paul. In her free time, Ong enjoys doing what makes her happy, which can range from relaxing at home to baking desserts, do-it-yourself crafts, arts and crafts projects, and traveling to new places.
Good evening.
Good evening, council members. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to meet all of you guys. And I've been enjoying Minnesota so far. It's quite different from California, but it's not too bad.
You're good. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Let's welcome all of them as well. I think this is our largest group that we've ever welcomed as a first time, welcoming people to the Bloomington City staff. So great to see everybody. Thank you very much for being on board. Here in Bloomington, we excel at the nuts and bolts work of community and city government. And what I heard from all of you, you're in the nuts and bolts world. And I'm looking forward to seeing the work that you're going to do and continuing to serve the residents of Bloomington. So very glad to have you here. Thanks much for being with us this evening. Thanks much. Moving on, we have item 2.2 is a proclamation for Black History Month, and I'm going to head down to the podium. As I said, item 2.2 is a proclamation for Black History Month here in the city of Bloomington. As you probably know, February is dedicated as Black History Month in the United States, and our Human Rights Commission and the Bloomington Black Employee Network has made the request once again this year that we issue a proclamation in honor of Black History Month. And I know that we have members of our Black Employee Resource Network and community partners here to join us. If you'd want to come on up and stand behind me here as I read the proclamation, and then we'll hand it over to you and give you the microphone if you'd like as well. Good evening and welcome. This is our proclamation, Black History Month, February 2024. Whereas Dr. Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in 1915, initiated Negro History Week in 1926 as a way of highlighting the involvement and accomplishments of Black Americans in the development of our nation's democracy. And whereas, as part of the nation's bicentennial, Negro History Week was expanded to Black History Month in 1976. And whereas during Black History Month, we acknowledge, honor, and celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Black Americans to our nation's economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas by observing Black History Month, it provides us with an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of Black history as American history in the United States, and to acknowledge the centuries of struggles for equality and freedom, as well as the achievements and successes. And whereas in 2021, to celebrate Black History Month, the Office of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging introduced the Bloomington Pioneers and Changemakers, a profile series featuring local Black leaders who are working to advance civil rights and remove barriers to equity. And whereas in this annual profile series, the city honors pioneers who have done so much to chart the path to where we are today, and changemakers who are paving the way for future generations. And whereas each year we will continue to highlight and honor dedicated Black leaders in the city of Bloomington. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Tim Bussey, do hereby proclaim February 2024 as Black History Month in the city of Bloomington, dated this 29th day of January 2024. Thank you very much for being here to accept it. I'll turn the microphone over to you, please.
I appreciate it. Very good. I am John Stain. I'm the co-chair of the BBEN, Bloomington's Black Employee Network. I am also in the assessing division in the Community Development Department. I certainly appreciate this. I appreciate the acknowledgement. I appreciate the work that we've been able to do within the community. I also want to let folks know we're currently working on the finalizing the event, the Pioneers and Changemakers, at the end of the month. So it'll be on the last Thursday of the month at 5:30 at the Zawadi Center. But be on the lookout for that, and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Of course.
Congratulations. Thanks for your work, and thanks for being part of the Black Employee Network.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Item 3 on our agenda is our consent business. Councilmember D'Alessandro has the consent business tonight. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Make sure that was on, sorry. I blocked my own microphone. It probably tells you something. Stick to it, Lona. I don't have any holds from anybody. I'll make one more last call here. If that is where we're at, then by tradition I will hold on to 3.1 and move items 3.2 to 3.25 on our consent agenda.
Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Mua to accept tonight's consent agenda as stated. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-0. Councilmember D'Alessandro, item 3.1.
Yes, thank you. As always, we love to call out and acknowledge when people are generous with their gifts to the city. It's amazing that I think almost every consent agenda seems to have donations items on it, which is just indicative of how generous a population we have. In this particular case, we have a great number of gifts to our BPD, including our K-9 unit, and we do have a special shout out to the folks at Home Instead who supported the holiday celebration event at Southgate Apartments. So once again, thank you to everybody who donates to our police department, our other programs. It's above and beyond the call of duty, and we really appreciate it. With that, I will move item 3.1.
Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Mua to accept item 3.1 on our consent agenda this evening. No further council discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Councilmember D'Alessandro. Appreciate it. Council, we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda. That's our hearings, resolutions, and ordinances. And we will start with item 4.1, which is a public hearing to approve the feasibility report and order the pavement management program Park Trail Improvement Project. Bob Simons, there he is. I knew you were here. He's our senior civil engineer, and he will be presenting this evening. Good evening, Mr. Simons.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. As mentioned, we're here tonight to order the 2024-111 PMP Park Trail Improvement Project. This project is in close coordination with our Bryan Park and Treadpaw Park renovation projects. We've been working close with our Park and Recreation staff as well as their team on this project, and the Park and Recreation staff will be coming, I believe, in February to review the status of the actual park renovation projects. This is encompassing the sidewalks and trail connectivity to those parks with this project. So I'll run through a short presentation here of review the projects at Bryant and Treadpaw, some public engagement, so the funding sources, and then a few of the next steps. To start with, a project overview for the Bryant Park sidewalk and trail improvements. A few of the design highlights. We'd be looking to install a 6-foot sidewalk around the exterior of Bryant Park, so adjacent to, as you see on the map here, what you would see in pink. I know it's kind of hard to see, but on Emerson, 84th and a half, 84th, Aldrich, Bryant, and 85th as well, installing a 6-foot sidewalk around the exterior of the park. Also, through our public engagement for Bryant and Treadpaw, we received a strong outpouring from the neighbors. It was something that we were already looking into installing, but a strong outpouring from the neighbors for crossings of 86th Street at both Emerson and Bryant to get from those neighborhoods to the south up to the park. So we're looking at, with this project, installing some pedestrian crossings, some median refuge islands at Emerson and at Bryant, and then also some sidewalk adjacent to Bryant and Emerson. And on the next slide, I'll get a little bit more in depth into that. Also, I should mention there was a lot of public engagement, a lot of comments about a connection up on 82nd Street as well, crossing of 82nd Street to get down to the park. That's a little bit outside of the scope of this project, but engineering staff, Park and Rec staff is very aware of that, and we'd look to be including that on a future project. Also in the Bryant Park area, we received a lot of comments when we had some of our neighborhood meetings about the need for traffic calming in the area. A lot of speeding through the neighborhoods, cut through traffic in the neighborhoods. So we're looking at utilizing the installation of some bump outs. Did I do something?
I hit the wrong button. I apologize. I turned the whole system off. Grant?
I can keep going if you'd like, but...
I didn't even know I was able to do that, by the way. That's good to know, though.
It's a sign to cut me off.
Standing by. All right, there we're back. The mic is back, and I think, hold on, it's coming back on. I apologize, Bob, my bad.
No, that's totally fine.
There you go.
Are we back? All right.
I didn't know I could do that.
There we go. Get that full screen for you.
How are we looking, Matt?
We are back in business here.
Good, thank you. Again, my apologies.
That's just fine. All right, curb bump outs. We're looking to install curb bump outs on Emerson, DuPont, 84th, and Aldrich with this project. Also, just looking at overall ADA accessibility upgrades and the exterior of the park, the entrances to the park as well, along with some storm sewer upgrades along 84th, 84th and a half, and DuPont. We have a PMP reconstruction project that's already been ordered for 84th Street and DuPont and 84th and a half on the north side of the park. We'd look to coordinate some storm sewer upgrades with that project, with this sidewalk and trail project as well. Looking a little bit closer at the Bryant and Emerson Avenue walk, as I mentioned, we're looking to install sidewalk on the exterior of the park, Bryant Park. These two locations would be sidewalk to be installed adjacent to properties along Emerson and along Bryant Avenue. So on Emerson Avenue, that's one of the locations where we'd be looking to do some traffic calming with a bump out on Emerson Avenue with the installation of this sidewalk. And then on Bryant Avenue, also on the east side of Bryant Avenue, looking at making a sidewalk connection from 86th up to the park. For both of these locations, we looked at either the east or the west side for sidewalk installation, and it was definitely more feasible to be installing sidewalk on the east side in both locations for a few different reasons. Existing topography in the area, the existing grades in the boulevards, existing landscaping, available right-of-way, some utility conflicts, some storm sewer conflicts in the area, and then also just overall connectivity across 86th Street, not having a skewed crossing at some of these locations. So looking at, like I mentioned, installing sidewalk on the east side of Bryant and on Emerson. We have had direct contact with these residents. The sidewalk would be installed in the city's right-of-way within the boulevard area. We've had direct contact with the residents through phone calls, voicemails, direct mailings, and then we also had the opportunity to speak with a few of them at our neighborhood, our public engagement meetings. Did recently speak with the folks that live at 86th and Emerson on that corner, and they noted the amount of foot traffic that they see in the spring and summer months, and we're very excited to hear that this installation was going to be occurring. So, then moving on to the Tretba Park improvements. With this, we're looking at, once again, similar to Bryant, making connectivity improvements to Tretba Park. Looking at a 10-foot trail installation adjacent to the park from France to just east of Beard Avenue. As you know, a few years ago, we installed a multimodal trail on the west side of France Avenue with a boardwalk near that location as well. This would be a connection from that over to Tretba Park, multimodal connection. Over to the park, through the neighborhood engagement, we also received a response from folks, something that we were intending on installing, but we definitely received some positive feedback on the installation of a pedestrian crossing at 90th Street to get access to Tretba Park. So we'd be looking at doing that with this project, as well as just overall ADA accessibility upgrades to the park. And I should mention, what you see for Tretba and Bryant Park for the layouts within the park, as I mentioned, Park and Recreation staff will be coming with their team in it sounds like in February, to review the status of that project. So those layouts are not accurate to this point. They're going to be updated before we come forward, or they come forward with those projects. So just something to note. I believe that's it for Tretba Park. And then let's see, neighborhood public engagement. As I mentioned a few times already, we've done some public engagement over the past few months. 22 and 23 as part of the Park Master Plan engagement for Bryant and Tretba Park. Our Park and Recreation staff had a lot of engagement with the Bryant and Tretba Park folks. For this project specifically, for the sidewalk and trails, a lot of the engagement started in July of 23. We came to City Council to order a feasibility report, order the start of a feasibility report. And then also in July of 2023, we had a neighborhood meeting, Bryant Avenue neighborhood meeting. We jumped on with the Bryant Avenue Park renovation neighborhood meeting, and the engineering staff held a meeting to review the overall traffic needs in the area. And that's where we had a lot of the feedback on the crossings at 86th Street, the need for the connections from 86th Street up to the park, traffic calming needs and things of that sort. Then in September of 2023, there was additional Bryant and Tretbaugh Park renovation park meetings that engineering attended with the park staff. Then from that point through January here, we've had direct contact through voicemails, phone calls, direct mailings to the residents that are directly adjacent to the new sidewalk being installed on Emerson and Bryant. And then we're here tonight for the public hearing. Quickly on the project costs. Overall project costs, when including contingency and project administration, we're looking at about $1.3 million for both Bryant and Tretbaugh Park trails. Bryant Park being about $870,000 of that, and Tretbaugh being about $450,000 of that. We have a couple different funding sources. The main funding source for this is our PMP Park Trails construction source, which is one of the components of we use for our franchise fees for PMP Park Trails and sidewalk construction and maintenance. That's about $1.1 million, and then I mentioned we have some storm sewer upgrades. It's about $200,000 to get that to that $1.3 million total. Next steps, we'd be looking to complete design once the project is ordered here in February of 24. We'd come back with a consent item to approve plans and specs. We'd look to start advertising and bidding in March, April-ish of 2024. Construction in the summer of 2024, and we'll be coordinating it closely with the Bryant and Tretbaugh Park renovation, as well as our 24 PMP recon project on 84th and 84th and a half in DuPont. And with that, we have the recommended motion for this evening, and I know this is a public hearing. There may be folks here to speak from the adjacent properties, so I'll open it up to any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Simons.
Thank you.
Again, my apologies for the interruption.
Oh, no,
a quick question on the crossings that are planned. Are those simple refuge islands, or will they be the flashing lights, or what kind of crossings are we talking here?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, Mayor. As of now, they're pedestrian refuge islands with striped crosswalks in those locations. At both locations on 86th Street, then also on 90th Street as well. On 90th Street, we're looking to make that crossing ready if we were to install an RRFB in the future. But at this point, we don't believe it warrants the need for an RRFB. But if in the future it would be something that we'd add on to a different project. So,
thank you. I appreciate that. I guess my advice would be to overdo it in terms of the pedestrian crossings, whether it's a refuge island or whatever else can be done, just to ensure that we have safety for pedestrians as they cross it. And even if now it doesn't perhaps warrant it, it very well will or could in the future. And so I would say aim higher for the pedestrian crossings, just to make sure our pedestrians are safe. We've been hearing about that, and something we're concerned about. So if you could keep that in mind, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you.
Council, questions of Mr. Simons? Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned on 84th and a half Street in DuPont that you're coordinating with a stormwater project. Is that right? Did I get that right? Okay. Is that related to the conversation we've had about using that northern pond for runoff management? Is that related to that, or is it just like an infrastructure upgrade and not related to how the inflow happens?
In regards to the sidewalk and trail project, this is mostly just an infrastructure upgrade. In regards to the work that's occurring with this winter's pond dredging project on Bryant Avenue, that is being coordinated with that Bryant Park renovation. So a lot of the storm sewer upgrades that I'm talking about tonight are more directly related to the need for replacement of pipes that are existing pipes and things of that sort along 84th Street and 84th.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. So the actual changes we were talking about were related to will happen as part of the park renovation, not as part of this project.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Council, additional questions of Mr. Simons? If not, thank you, Mr. Simons. Stick around. Mm-hmm. This is a public hearing, and I will open the public hearing now on item 4.1. This is a public hearing regarding the approval of the feasibility report and to order the pavement management program Park Trail Improvement Project 2024-111. Is there anyone in the council chambers who wishes to speak to item 4.1 this evening? If you would like to speak, please come on forward. I was afraid you would say that. And as we get into our public hearings, I'll just lay down some ground rules here. First of all, we need you to sign in. We need to know who you are. Secondly, we limit everybody in their public hearings to 5 minutes, and which is why we have the shot clock on the wall. And we don't do that. We don't cut people off. I don't limit you to 5 minutes because I mean it's simply so we make sure that everybody gets the same 5 minutes and we don't give preference to anyone. So if you could tell us your name and introduce yourself and then jump right in.
I'm Ron Casa. My parents lived at the 8533. They both have died in the last year now. And I'm concerned about you putting the ped ramp in front of their house. We haven't sold it yet. Because we have, in the last 56 years that they lived there, it was when I was born, they moved there. We have had snow coming from that park that blows across, and we got 6 feet of snow in front of my mom and dad's house every year. And the catch basins freeze up, and it becomes a lake, and the city doesn't come out and chop the ice. Our kids, we do it. What's going to happen when we sell this house and them people? Then I want to know about the ped ramp that you're going to put across the street. I've been doing this business for 52 years. I know if you're going to make it an ADA ramp, you're going to have to tear out 20 feet of curb in front of the house. So what are you going to do with the 2 catch basins that are sitting there? Are you going to make them into ADA?
Mr. Casa, if you direct your questions to the council.
I was talking to him.
Understood.
I want him to answer.
He's listening. Yeah, he will. Don't worry.
Okay.
We'll take all the questions and
then we got
he'll
the 2
answer.
catch basins across the street. What are you going to do there? Because you can't move this ramp a little bit to the other side because there's a tree right there. Are you going to take them out? These are the questions that we want answered, and what's going to do for the new owner that's going to live there, because you're going to have all that snow coming across the lake. I live out in the country. I get 6 and 8 foot drifts going across my driveway, so I know what that park is going to do. And then where's that snow going to go? So that's the things we want answered, so we know what's going to happen, and if we tell the new homeowners what they got to do to keep the ice from forming, and are you going to send a crew out there all the time to chop ice? Because when my mom and dad lived there, we'd call, and they wouldn't do it. I know it. The city is big. They got a lot of parks. I know everybody that works for Public Works and how they plow, so I know what they're going through. But
so why don't we do this?
Questions we want to know.
Appreciate your questions. I'll have Mr. Simons, as we finish up with the public hearing, staff will answer questions, and then ideally we'll have you step out, and if you have more specific questions, and he can talk very specifically with you and see if we can.
That's what we need to know. So.
Very good. Thank you. I saw another hand up. Please come and join us.
Hello, I'm Robert Coleman. I have never been to Bryant Park, but I've been to Treadwell Park. And as somebody who, I walk to work every day, 5 days a week, I have to deal with a lot of, I have a lot of issues in terms, I don't have the issues, two-way stops. When you have, I walk along I cross the street, for example, at 108th and France, and there's a bump out, and there's a two-way stop, except the people who don't have the stop sign just blast through. I've had, at that exact location, twice people have intentionally tried to hit me while crossing the street, and once somebody has accidentally tried to, accidentally almost hit me crossing the street. And I'm really concerned about, I understand that maybe the rectangular crossing beacons are not warranted in those locations, and I really appreciate you, Mr. Mayor, for saying that that you guys want to hazard safer rather than cheaper, obviously. But those kinds of crossing treatments really give some kind of peace of mind to me. And really a four-way stop is better. I know there are traffic concerns, but when a car has the threat of another car hitting them, T-boning them, that is way more of a deterrent from what I've seen than me. I've had other troubles in other locations in that area, but I know that bump out with a two-way stop, and even with just the reflective yellow sign for a pedestrian crossing, it's not enough for some people. So that is really all I have to say.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Coleman. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to item 4.1? Mr. Brillert, do we have anyone on the phone who wishes to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have someone waiting on the line with with a couple public hearings and public comment opportunities. I'll check in with them to see which item they're calling about. Caller with the phone number beginning with 612-373. Are you calling in to speak on item 4.1 or another item this evening? And one more call. Caller with the phone number 612-373. Your line is unmuted. Are you looking to speak on this item, 4.1, or another item?
All right. Well, thank you for the effort, Mr. Brillert. Appreciate it. Last call for anyone in the council chambers to speak to item 4.1. Council, no one on the phone, no one coming forward in the council chambers. With that, I'd look for a motion to close the public hearing on item 4.1 this evening.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to close the public hearing on item 4.1. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-0, closing the public hearing on item 4.1. So, Mr. Simons, a couple of questions came up. Mr. Casa, in particular, concerned about snow removal and so on. You heard the questions. Can you respond or respond as best you can? But as I said, I think it might be best a conversation, perhaps out in the hall, might be the best. But if you could, Mr. Simon.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, I can try to answer a few of those questions and whatever else can be answered out in the hallway. In regards to the pedestrian ramp installation, there was the question about curb removals in the area, and yes, we'll definitely be removing a portion of curb, probably upwards of 20 feet at the location of those pedestrian ramp installations, so that we can be sure that the pedestrian ramp that is installed is ADA compliant. I know there are some catch basins, some storm sewer structures, as Mr. Casa referred to, in that location, actually just north of the location where we'd plan on putting those pedestrian ramps. But that's something, as we work through design, that we have to take a close look at and make sure that we're able to get ADA accessibility at those pedestrian ramps with the locations that those structures are in. If things need to be moved, we'll have to move them. But like I said, we're looking to install those pedestrian ramps south of those existing storm sewer structures. And also there was a comment or question about a tree in the area on the west side of Bryant Avenue. Once again, we're looking to install the pedestrian ramp outside of the area of that existing tree, just to the south of that tree location. But with that said, we're still in the process of design for the project. So we have to look at the grades. We have to look at what's going to work for those pedestrian ramps. In regards to snow, city staff comes through and plows our sidewalks whenever we have snow events. I'm not sure where this particular walk would be on the list of what order of the list as to how soon it's plowed, but it would be something that would be maintained and plowed, and especially with it being a pedestrian ramp in that location, it'd be something where we'd be looking to clear the snow from that location. I believe that was the majority of the questions that were asked.
I think you got those, and perhaps you and Mr. Casa could still step out if he has additional questions. And Mr. Coleman asked about four-way stops and so on, but I think we're pretty set on the pedestrian crossings as we had talked about to overdo rather than underdo, but not necessarily move all the way to a four-way stop.
Correct. Yep.
Council, any additional questions that we missed here? No, Councilmember D'Alessandro?
Just thank you, Mr. Mayor. Follow-up question. When we did the review of the additional signage and other things like that, we were willing to fund to bring into conversations like this. Did we talk a bit about high reflective product? I'm asking that because you can go a long way with that, especially since we get such dark winter times. To add just reflecting product to signage and other things like that would certainly help. So I don't know if that's part of what we talked about. I remember we added more like radar, mobile radar things and other stuff like that, but I'm curious as whether or not we're including any more, like any innovations in high reflectivity on those signages and other things we'd put in this area.
Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, in regards to the signage that we'd put in the area, my understanding is we would just be following the manual on requirements for what we need for reflectivity in that area. Beyond that, I guess I'm not sure of anything in particular.
I think I know somebody who might be, and he just snuck his way forward. Kirk Roberts, if you could help us out.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, we do use high reflectivity on all of our sign installations, higher than the minimum standards we're required to by the manual. So yeah, we use that in everything now.
Great, thanks. Mr. Mayor, the main reason I think that I definitely want us to over-index on this, largely because the majority of, especially if you think about what we're doing at Tretbaugh with the Skills Park, that's bikes, and so kids on bikes crossing 90th, like I'd want to shut traffic down as best as possible there. So hopefully we can make some advancements in that for sure. Thanks.
Agreed, Councilmember. Councilmember Lohman?
So it just occurs to me, I think about Valley View, and that area there has a stop there, if I remember correctly. Would we ever consider something of that magnitude for that area? I don't know what the traffic pieces look like there, and I don't want to do this at the nth hour, and we always could come back and do it again. But I just think about that, based on the comments that Councilmember D'Alessandro just raised. We have that there for that Valley View area where you literally have the traffic coming to a stop there to come across the piece. Could something like that be done?
I do think, Councilmember, I hope the message was heard loud and clear that to overdo this, if at all possible, in terms of pedestrian safety, whether it's the traffic lights, four-way stop, the flashers, the safety islands, whatever we need to do, and to try and engineer this in as much as possible, engineer safety in as much as possible at these locations.
Correct.
So, and whatever that would be, and I would defer to you folks in terms of what would be best, what's feasible. If it's a financial thing, we could scout around for some IIJA grants or something along those lines and see if we can't come up with some cash for this, because I think it's absolutely crucial.
Well, yeah, correct. Mayor and Councilmember Lohman, we'll work with our traffic staff on finding the right treatment for those.
Good, thank you.
Patients. Yep.
Council, no further questions on this? If not, I would look for action on item 4.1 this evening.
I'd be thrilled, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
And just a quick comment, if that's okay. Thank you to the staff for taking seriously the work that we did early on to look at these parks. The idea that we've asked the city to help fund millions of dollars of park improvements and not figure out how to make sure people can get to and from those safely. And so looking at this and having those organizations from parks as well as traffic and everything all coming together to do this is really great. I'm super excited about it, and I know that people will appreciate that we've gone above and beyond this way. So thank you. They both happen to be in my district, so I'm super excited about it and have been paying extra attention to it, as the folks on city staff know. Really, really appreciate it. I'd be very happy to make the motion to adopt a resolution ordering the 2024-111 Pavement Management Program Park Trail Improvement Project.
Second. Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Mua, to adopt the resolution ordering the Pavement Management Program Park Trail Improvement Project. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation and the information. And we will move on to item 4.2 on our agenda. This is our second public hearing of the evening, and this is a public hearing regarding the vacation of public drainage, utility, sidewalk, and bikeway easements over and across Outlots B and U at Bloomington Central Station Central 2nd Edition. Mr. Keel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is one of those kind of routine public hearings that is associated with the redevelopment at Bloomington Central Station. So this is actually helping facilitate the redevelopment that you previously approved as part of the consent agenda. And what we're doing is we're releasing a number of easements that are on those properties. And after that happens, the developer will go through a replatting of those, and will replat those easements that are necessary. So this is kind of just cleaning up the property to facilitate the future platting of it. These releases won't actually be filed until the plat is approved. So there is no chance that we would release these easements and then the developer wouldn't proceed and we would lose the easements. So we are recommending approval.
Council, questions of Mr. Keel on this item? No questions, Mr. Keel? Thank you very much. Stick around. This is a public hearing, and I will open it now on item 4.2, a public hearing regarding the vacation of public drainage, utility, sidewalk, and bikeway easements as stated in the council packet. Is there anyone in the council chambers who wishes to speak to item 4.2 this evening? See no one coming forward. Mr. Brillard, anyone on the phone?
Mr. Mayor, just the same phone number hanging in there. Do we want to check in with them?
Just give them one more shot, should we?
Some audio issues. So again, caller with the number beginning with 612-373, your line is unmuted. Were you looking to speak on item 4.2 or one of our other items tonight?
Maybe they're just listening in tonight. That sounds good. Last call for anybody in the council chambers to speak to item 4.2. Council, no one on the phone, no one coming forward in the council chambers. I will look for a motion to close item 4.2, the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to close the public hearing on item 4.2. No further council discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-0. Council, questions, comments, concerns regarding 4.2? Councilmember Lohman.
Be happy to make the motion.
I see no questions coming forward, so Councilmember Lohman, please.
Mayor, be happy to adopt an ordinance approving the vacation of public drainage, utility, and sidewalk, bikeway over and across Outlots B and U, Bloomington Central Station, 2nd edition, parcels 97-11.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember Mua to adopt the ordinance as stated in item 4.2. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-0. Thank you much, Mr. Keel. Thanks, council. Move on to item 4.3 on our agenda. This is an update on our electric vehicle infrastructure plan, and we will have a public comment opportunity as well. And Mr. Hansen is back with us this evening, and we discussed this earlier. Was it last month, I believe?
It was earlier this month, actually.
Earlier this month, okay. And I know you've had a chance to talk with the Planning Commission. You've talked with the Sustainability Commission on this, gotten some public input as well, and we've got a couple of tweaks to this. So if you could please present it, and then the plan will be we will open it up to a public comment opportunity, and then council will we will decide on action on this if necessary. So, Mr. Hansen.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council. As you mentioned, I'm back before you again with the final electric vehicle infrastructure plan. So I just have a couple quick slides here. So just to give some project updates, as the mayor mentioned, we did go before the Planning Commission, Sustainability Commission, as well as yourselves with a draft plan to get feedback from all those boards and commissions. Since then, we took in the feedback we received into the final plan and then went back to those two commissions. So Sustainability Commission on January 16th and the Planning Commission on January 18th. And both commissions did recommend a motion of acceptance for the council to consider the plan. So the next steps, if the plan is accepted this evening at council, we would form an EV infrastructure implementation work group made up of city staff to create an action item matrix to look at the items that are identified in the plan, the action items, and kind of rank them as far as which items to address first, and then actually begin implementation. So bringing back those items before council and those boards and commissions as needed. We also included in the executive summary there a note to reevaluate the plan in 5 years. I know that came up at the city council meeting at the discussion item. And obviously, if the plan needs to be reevaluated prior to that, we will do that. But we wanted to have a touch point in there. So after 5 years, looking at the work we've made on the plan, has technology changed? Are there new, and more innovative ways? Should we still be working down this path? Should we be moving this? Should we be updating it? So we just wanted to make sure we had a touch point in there to go back and reevaluate that in full. I'll always understand that we do have the ability to pivot if needed, if things happen faster in those 5 years. So, and then with that, we have a suggested motion before you this evening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. So you mentioned the action item implementation and then bringing back. As the work group puts the plan in place and you start in action, at what level will it come back to the Planning Commission, to the Sustainability Commission, or the City Council in terms of approval or thumbs up, thumbs down, or input on what these plan items might be?
Yep, I think that will be the first task. I think the first thing, based on the feedback that I received, that commission or that implementation group is going to be doing is identifying public charging and how we want to handle that as a city. That's what I've heard from feedback from the two commissions as well as yourselves. So I think the first task, again, without having that meeting first, is to go through, look at the options for implementation in the public space and how we want to address that as a city, bring some examples of what other cities are doing before the council for your consideration, and then kind of have an idea of how we want to do that if we want to be, have that be in the right-of-way along the streets, curbside, if we want that to be in public spaces such as parks or city, city facilities, and how we want to move forward with that. If we want to just have the ability for the private sector to make that change, we want to be, seeking people to install those. So those are some of the questions I think that I foresee us being one of the first items that we tackle is that group. And
Thank
be
you.
back before the council as well as engaging with the community as we go through that process.
Appreciate that. Council questions. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
I do have a question. As somebody who has an electric vehicle, Mr. Mayor, I know that there was a decent amount of press, especially I happened to be in Houston, Texas, the week that there was a cold snap everywhere in the country, and there was a lot of discussion about cold weather and how it has an impact on charging vehicles. So my question is, in light of that information, is there anything that we want to make sure we include in this plan that would make considerations for that? For example, prioritizing indoor locations over external outdoor locations because they're more, able to stay at a consistent temperature. Things of that nature. So it's a piece of the puzzle that we may not have had. Like we didn't have necessarily this information. I don't know, but I didn't see it in here when I reviewed it. So I wanted to just bring it up there and ask the question. Late breaking data that might suggest we add another piece of the puzzle here.
Great, thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, council member. That's a great question. I think you for bringing that up. I foresee that as part of the charging design. When you look at the kind of the 5 elements of the 5 cores, that's one we look at in there. I think interior charging in the realm of public facilities may be a little challenging just based on the areas we're looking to install those. But when you look at maybe encouraging that in private developments or in multifamily developments, those type of things, I think that's something that we can look at, and there may be ways that we can implement that and levers that we can pull to help facilitate that. So that's a good point.
Councilmember Nelson, then Councilmember Rivas, then Councilmember Lohman. Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. First of all, this is very comprehensive and appreciate that you worked with all the groups to get the feedback and bring this back and overall support it. I like that you're looking at the infrastructure at our facilities kind of as potentially the first step. Just one thing that I would recommend, a lot of these items may be covered at state level, like in building codes, including, the building code, what you can and can't do and what you have to do and what you may do, those types of things, but also, the standards for them and that type of thing. And I know that these things are changing on a fairly rapid basis and things like that. So I guess my one suggestion to you is, to the extent that some other level of government is already doing it, let's not spend a lot of time on that and duplicate efforts, because I think a lot of those things are going to change. And then the other thing, I do have one concern, and I have a plug-in hybrid electric, is just fire safety, particularly if you're going to put these in underground parking under multifamily. And if one of these things catches on fire, you're not going to put that thing out for a long time. You're going to have huge damage in that building, and it's a huge concern for me just from what I've learned about the fire, the energy in those batteries and things like that. So I guess that would be my other thing. Make sure we're working with our great fire department in addressing any concerns that they might have with those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council member. To the second point about the fire, yes, I know that we've had discussions about that, about storage of batteries and other thing in some private developments, work with our fire department, so we'll definitely have them in the loop as we look into some of those charging design standards. I'm blanking on your first comment right now, your first question. I was going to respond. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, as far as, coordinating our work with other work that's going on, that's a great point as well. There's a lot of stuff that's going on at the federal level, at the state level. So what we want to do is not, as you said, duplicate that same work, but make sure that we're plugged into what is current so that we can react to that. I know as staff that I'm involved in a lot of different message groups and a lot of different other groups. So, trying to make sure that I'm up to date on what is currently going on at those different levels so that we aren't reinventing the wheel and we're making sure that our work, complements that work that's already being done and not duplicating that work. So,
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rivas. Councilmember, if you could turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry. My apologies. I just have a comment to make in regards to electric vehicles. I'm in no way whatsoever against progress. I do like the technology. I like to see us move into the future in many other ways. However, in the last couple of weeks, I have learned that big companies like Ford, Hertz have canceled their electric vehicle programs, right? Losses into the billions of dollars. And I question how can the city be planning on installing an infrastructure of a technology that is not being feasible by companies such as Ford and Hertz and perhaps others that we haven't heard about yet. So my question is, how can we be planning on installing an infrastructure that there is no demand for it? And to second that question is, when has ever a government of any level has provided fuel for the population in any way, shape, or form? And this is what we will be providing, right? Electric fuel or electricity for vehicles to be charged. So to me, I think it's something that we could be looking at perhaps 10, 15 years from now, but to be investing heavily into this type of infrastructure, I don't think it makes any sense based on what other companies are doing right now, slowing their production down, eliminating the programs totally. Electric vehicles are great. They don't have any emissions, but the way that we get electricity is still coal, fossil fuels, wind and the sun are not reliable in this area. And we experienced just 2 years ago in Texas a total shutdown of entire cities, right? So I just wonder why we are moving in that direction.
Thank you. That's a fair comment, Mr. Mayor, Council Member. The way I envision this plan being utilized is that it provides us with kind of a roadmap of how we want to decide as a city to move forward. So I don't think the adoption or acceptance of this plan means that we're going to start building. I know it's not going to mean we're starting to build chargers tomorrow. What I think it will do is help us determine, are there areas where we want to encourage or promote charging? And then it's up to us to decide, do we want to do that as a city, or do we want to have the framework in place to allow the free market to decide? So if we say we want charging in these areas, then maybe we have a way for them to come to us and say, if there's a demand for that, they can install that. And then we're ready for that and we can react to that. And if someone comes to us and says, hey, we want to install chargers, we're not just saying throw them out anywhere. We have a plan or kind of identified a way that we can roll those out in a way that makes sense that we've thought about before. So I understand your comment. That's the way I see it personally. And again, before any installation would actually take place, we'd be before this body again to, have you guys provide your feedback and, approval of that. So there'd be other opportunities to have that discussion. But just to your point about providing chargers at the city level, I see this as more of a way of being ready to have that infrastructure in place if the market demands it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you, Mayor. To that point, Mayor, I almost wish we could, change this and rename it and say the alternative vehicle infrastructure plan as opposed to the electric, although we're leading with electric, so it really doesn't make sense to kind of do that. And I do appreciate the fact that we are attempting to try to create a framework, for this as we kind of move forward. And I appreciate, and I know, you've heard my skepticism about this many a times, and I'm going to keep it positive tonight. But the idea that we'll be flexible and have the ability to pivot. I'm a big watcher of the CES. They are known for innovation. It's a conference that they have in Las Vegas, and it's kind of funny. Councilmember Mua brought up last time we were talking about this about hydrogen, and I guess they've got a number of products now that they're looking again to bring back with this hydrogen piece. And so I just would like to emphasize that we're really careful with that, especially what we saw, in Chicago with Tesla. And those types of things, that we're just really careful as we put together this framework. I do believe this meets part of what we're trying to do around climate change, as we have passed a climate change emergency, and so doing nothing is not an acceptable thing. And this is, I think, the next best step forward in that process, and that's the reason why I can support this. If there aren't any other comments, I'm more than happy to move this.
Well, Councilmember, we've got a public comment period. Yeah, there's a public comment period. Councilmember D'Alessandro?
Would you like me, Mr. Mayor, to hold my additional comments till after the public comment
Let's do
period?
that, yes. Yep.
Very good. I will. Thank you.
Any specific questions for Mr. Hanson? All right. Then why don't we Stick around, Mr. Hanson, and we will open up this this public comment opportunity here on item 4.3, the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. Same rules as our public hearings. We'll give everybody 5 minutes. You could state your name and sign in, and we'll limit you to 5 minutes. And then we'll save up the questions for the end, and then we'll ask the questions and try and answer them the best we can as we go here. So I know we've got at least a couple of people who wanted to speak to our to the plan. So if you wanted to step forward, please come on forward.
See which side of the pen works there. I'm not sure what agenda item this is, but
good evening. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, believe it or not, I'm here to help.
If you could start by introducing yourself for the record, please.
Bruce Colton.
Thank you, Mr. Colton.
And I talked to the Planning Commission. I'm an electrical engineer. Did my bachelor's, my master's at the University of Minnesota, and I worked on my PhD all the way up through all the coursework at the University of Minnesota. I was the director of research and technology at Control Data, under which I had 8 meteorologists working for me, so I know a little bit about green, and I have some things to say about that. But I'm limiting myself to the electric vehicle issue that we're talking about tonight. I'm here to help, okay? This is not a topic that you vote on, really. It's not weighing your opinion to somebody else's opinion. This is a matter of fact. And I'm sorry for reading off this, but to just for time's sake. This is gonna, if you make a mistake, this is gonna cost us, and it's gonna cost us dearly. It's gonna cost everybody in this room. And if your government subsidized from the federal level, that's still costing us. This is an expensive activity. You know, I briefed the Planning Commission and cited academic data from about 50 papers. I'm not here to go over that except to say that you have to look at the embodied emissions when you're looking at electric vehicles. And they range as far as 20 tons of CO2, which is about as much. That's just to get the electric vehicle into the hands of the consumer. That's as much as you spend on a lifetime of a conventional vehicle. So it's already a net negative to the environment by the time it's delivered, okay? The other thing is energy density. It was brought up here a little bit. Energy density is about 17 times greater with a gas-powered vehicle, and you see that happening when cold weather hits. That energy density goes right to the floor, and you lose your range tremendously. But I feel like kind of a snowball in Minnesota about this time and changing your opinions in terms of doing something about this. But really, this is something that you really have to take into consideration. You don't have to do anything. I know that the person who's in charge of this said, well, we're just looking for, approval. We're not going to do anything yet. Well, it's just like all of you on the council. You're in those seats and you feel like you have to do something. And that's going to be the same attitude. They're going to want to be pushing it forward. They're going to want to do things. And after briefing the Planning Council, the chairman said this. He said, they were all like taking into what I was saying in the facts. If you go back to the Planning Council, if you want to listen to the facts, you'll get some good facts out of that. But he said, well, this is like so many other things. The solution is all of the above, not just one approach. They were talking about hybrids versus EVs. No, this is not like all of the above. EVs are pollution. They are pollution. You will be polluters if you go down this route. You shouldn't be supporting it. EV vehicles make you the polluter. You don't clean the lake by dumping more hazardous waste into the water. At least I wouldn't. On the day that they're delivered, they're already a net negative. I've said that already. This is not a, well, let's all vote. The majority will make it right. We'll make the engineering come out right. It doesn't work like that. The engineering is the engineering. EV vehicles are wrong. I drive a hybrid. I love it. It's perfect. There's a difference between a hybrid and an EV vehicle. Hybrid cars are the right solution because they're not supplying an alternative energy source. This is really important. They are not supplying an alternative energy source. They are successful because they are capturing momentum that would otherwise be wasted in the process of driving. That's why hybrid vehicles make sense. They're capturing all the acceleration, the deceleration that would otherwise go into heat on your brakes, and they're putting into a battery to be used afterwards. That's important, okay? The fact is that every time you convert from one energy to another, from water to a generator to anything to a battery, back from the battery to drive the car, you lose efficiency. There's a loss of efficiency in every conversion. Going in and coming out, you lose energy. That's why in Germany they have a new phrase called energy poverty, because when they, oh boy, okay, okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Clinton, your time is up, but thank you. Thank you.
Optimism will not fix the engineering. There's a wonderful Yiddish saying, the sun will set without your help. You don't need to do this. You don't need to push.
Thank you, Mr. Colton.
technology.
Time is up.
You really
Thank you so
don't
very
need
much.
to. Thought you'd give me a little extra. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come on up. And you can get signed in after you're done if you'd like. You can just go ahead and you can sign in after you're done, and we bring the next speaker up
All right.
in terms of efficiency here.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff. I am here to, of course, address item 4.3. In specific.
And if I could ask you just to state your name for the record. So
Eileen Bergerson.
Thank you.
For reference, it is bullet point on page 18 of the proposal, on page 269 in the agenda packet PDF, and it's planning recommendations. The proposal includes a recommendation to place EV charging stations in our city parks. So for those that are watching, it says add existing and planned charging sites to parks and other plans. The other bullet point I'm concerned about is create parking time limit policy and identify enforcement mechanisms. I am unequivocally opposed to the plan of placing EV charging stations in our parks for 4 reasons. 1, safety. Part 2 of safety is identifying those enforcement mechanisms. Number 3 is vandalism. And number 4 is what is the purpose of our parks? So, safety, it's just not a stellar idea. To have people parked for a long period of time where our kids are playing and our families are playing. We have no control over, who those folks are, call me paranoid, but I don't think it is. How long are they going to be there charging? Half hour? 2 hours? Are they going to leave their vehicle? Are they going to park? Are they going to sit? Are they going to stand? And are we going to have people parked in our parks at all hours of the night charging? Part 2 is the enforcement mechanisms. I'm just wondering if you're going to be relying on our Bloomington police force to do this enforcement. I don't know what other, what other choice there is. And I just, and this is not to blame our police department at all. I support them. I believe in them. I trust them. I've been a block captain for 30 plus years, a Bloomington resident for 34 plus years. But I was on September 26th at 2:24 in the afternoon. I saw 2 men drive into vehicles, drive into Running Park. They both got out. They were loitering. They saw me. They went to the other end of the park. I called 911 because in my gut it was suspicious. It was a drug deal going down. They saw me. They moved. Unfortunately, our police call, I heard from dispatch that they had more critical calls at that time and they were not able to respond to my call. So they left. How are we going to be placing that extra burden of enforcement on our police department when I experience this on a suspicious call? Vandalism, cords are being cut for the copper. There was a Star Tribune article today that the city of Minneapolis is experiencing that problem with their 70-plus planned chargers. There is a specific person, Mike Norton in Minneapolis, who was not able to charge his vehicle because he couldn't find a charger, and the one he wanted to use, the cord was cut. And is that going to happen in our parks? Vandalism. And finally, what is the purpose of our parks? I think it's for outdoor activities with our kids. It's so critical these days that families and kids can go to our parks, get away from technology to enjoy the peaceful nature and surroundings. The charging stations, I mean, we gotta agree, they're not lovely. And they really don't have any place in our parks. And then our parking lots are not large to begin with. And now there's a plan to take away even more of those parking spots for users of the parks so that people can sit and charge their EV vehicles. And really, EV drivers, they're an elite group. They're people who can afford these cars. And so that's, would just like you to consider my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I saw at least one more person coming forward. Good evening. If you could identify yourself, please.
My name's Eric Lang-Venice, and I've spent the last 25 years in computer security, and then it was information security, and now it's cybersecurity, apparently. And I just wanted to point out that electric vehicles are super complicated computers. Charging stations are very sophisticated computers that interact. It's not like plugging a cord into a wall socket. I can pick an app on my phone and find the nearest charging station and whether it's occupied and things like that, right? So this whole infrastructure is sophisticated. And the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which defines everything from what the second is to what a fire hydrant looks like, and the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence have a joint task force on defining a cyber risk framework for electric vehicle charging. And I haven't seen your plan, but if it does not, I would really urge that it have a section of security considerations that discuss what the risks are, what the tolerance for them is, and what sort of minimum standards of equipment, so that we have an idea that if we plug our car in, our car's not at risk, the infrastructure's not at risk, and so on. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak on this one? Please come forward.
Hello, my name's Brian Savig. I just basically have one question, and I'm wondering if I'm allowed to cede the balance of my 5 minutes to Mr. Colton, if that's allowed.
No, that's not how we do that here.
Okay,
everybody gets 5 minutes.
He knows a lot more about it than I do.
I got it, but everybody gets that 5-minute bite of the apple.
All right,
So.
thank you. I guess my one question is to just be totally clear on, I heard that this is planning only, and that before we do anything other than plan, that it would come back for a public hearing and public input. Is that true? Is there anything in this that we're doing that is installing, is putting infrastructure in place, a physical or anything other than planning?
And that's the question that I asked. That was the question that I asked earlier, and I hope you heard the question or the answer. That yes, this is.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
I just want to be clear on that. Thank you very much.
Okay. No, not you.
Hello,
Welcome
Robert
back.
Coleman here again. I would like to use my comment opportunity to provide some counterpoints to things that I have heard from other people here, respectfully, definitely respectfully. I agree with the issues of the potential of the lithium-ion batteries the fires that can result from them. That is definitely something that can be very concerning. Those fires can last for like hours with very little way to put them out. I heard concerns about renewable energy in general. I have Googled for Xcel Energy, their power mix in terms of what sources they come from. It doesn't have Minnesota in specific, but it has upper Midwest, where 69% of it is carbon free, 18% of it is coal, 13% natural gas, 28% nuclear, 30% wind, 4% solar, and 7% other. I assume that's energy reclamation from garbage. The thing is that we're already using renewable energy for 70% of our power. I know not everybody gets it from Xcel Energy, but this is what I could find quickly. I heard that there was concerns about why we are providing parking at parks for electric charging. We provide parking at parks for gas cars anyway. And, sorry? Okay. And I feel like the, what was the other one? I feel like the answer is not to be, I agree with some of the concerns about electric vehicles, but my main concern is that the better answer is just trains. When you look at the reliability of our trains here in the Twin Cities when it comes to cold weather, all the time when I've been on buses where it's been slipping and sliding all over the road because of ice, and I can see on the app that like 70% of all buses in the area are some kind of delayed, except usually the trains are doing just fine. And when you have trains that are powered by overhead electric wires, you're not dealing with the environmental and ethical concerns of lithium mining and battery storage and energy density. It's just coming from the overhead wires. That can also be, those benefits can also be gained by having trolley buses that have overhead wires, and they perform better than, in Seattle, they've performed better in cold weather than battery buses or gas buses, from what I've read. I know that trolley buses are not in Metro Transit's ideas, but when you look at the range of battery buses, they are much lower compared to trolley, or in the cold weather. I feel like those could be the solutions that obviously not this body can do anything about. But I think if we're looking at whether we're going to have electric vehicles on the road, and we will have some, right, obviously, I feel like it's definitely the city's job to make sure that they are accommodated and that they can be a reasonable option even if they are not the best option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Others? Mr. Brillard, I heard the phone gave a chirp. I wonder if our speaker is ready to participate.
Mr. Mayor, the chirp was actually me. Grant Parker recommended that after our shutdown there that I just give the mic a mute and unmute. So if you'd like, we could call on that person one more time.
Let's give that caller one more chance, should we?
I'll do that now. Caller with the phone number starting with 612-373. Your line is unmuted should you wish to speak on item 4.3. Please do so now.
Mustn't just be listening tonight. That's fine, too. Last call for anybody in the council chambers. Anyone wish to speak to our public comment period here on item 4.3 tonight? Seeing no one coming forward, council, I will close our public comment opportunity on item 4.3 and turn to the council for discussion here. For questions, comments, I heard some, the only specific question I heard was from Mr. Savig about whether or not these would come back to the council, the planning commission, the sustainability commission, any actions moving forward. Is that the case, Mr. Hanson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anything that would be a policy update, obviously we go through our practice. So if it needed to go to council for approval, we would go through that process. If it is, like currently right now, we do allow for private charging to be installed. So if someone were to come to apply for a permit to install a private charger on private property, there's a process for that. So if there were final site and building plans or other things that needed approvals, whether it be administrative or planning commission or council, those would go through our normal procedures. If it was just a regular permit where we have a process in place and they were, permit complying, that permit would just be issued. So that wouldn't come back before us. But anything like policy issues, I think how we want to have these staged in the public realm, that's definitely a question for this body, and there would be a chance for engagement on that. But more procedural things, that would go through the staff procedures we normally do with other permits.
Very good. Thank you. And so, Council, I don't know if anybody heard any other specific questions that we think staff could answer regarding this specific policy that is being proposed. But questions, comments about the policy tonight? Councilmember Mua?
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have anything in this regarding the cybersecurity portion of it? And that just triggered my mind, just the thought of just data, especially in today's day and age where everyone's a piece of data and people are mining it and using it to their commercial profit. And so what do we have in there with that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor, council member. I was looking at that, and that would fall under our charging design kind of domain, that last one there. So again, thinking about if we are going to be as a city, if we're going to be the ones that are managing these systems, or if we're going to permit and take these out to third parties. But as far as security goes, we would want to know that would be something that we would have set up as far as what would be required, a minimum requirement of someone that was being permitted to install these in the public realm. So that's definitely something we would look at. And actually, we did have some folks that attended our open house in November that were kind of working in that field, and we had some really good discussions with them. They kind of brought up some different things, shared some feedback that they had and some of their viewpoints. So I actually got some contact information from one gentleman that works for a company like that. So that is definitely on there, and that would be fall in that charging design realm. So absolutely.
And then I'll just follow up with my comment on this. I have a late 2000s V8 pickup truck. I have no intentions of switching anytime soon, like many people I know. But I do understand the need for policy because at Target, we already have Tesla chargers right now. What if we run into the issues that we had in Chicago without policy in place? That could continue to be an issue that we see and clogging up that parking lot and increasing safety and security of the people who go to that particular store. And so that's really the main reason why I'm supporting this is because it is a plan and that any projects would come back and we would have our input and approval on it. But other than that, I would really have not a lot of interest in this and would like to see more of the private sector take the lead in doing the work and then the city putting the guidance around what they are able to do to protect the residents that we have here in the city. So that's kind of my comment on that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
All right, this is going to be good. I appreciate this discussion actually because I think that it's just the fact that we have a lot of information going around, not all of which is completely accurate one way or the other, on one side or the other, that it tells you that this is information and it isn't something that we're going to take immediate action on and do anything with right away, right? I think it's 5 years before we actually implement a single individual piece of this policy. But I think if we don't start talking about it, we'll be behind the ball 5 years from now when we need to have an understanding of what's going on there, right? So a couple of things. First off, I am not wealthy and I own an electric vehicle. I bought a 2018 BMW i3 for $21,000, so I don't feel like I fall into Tesla category. I know that F-150s, Ford F-150 Lightnings the production on that was cut here in January of this year, but that's the average or the initial price for a Ford F-150 Lightning is $57,000 up to $101,000. So it doesn't surprise me at all that luxury vehicles in a time of increased inflation and pressure on people and a lack of upward mobility when it comes to the average income of a household, that things that are really expensive aren't getting bought. But I don't consider my 2018 BMW i3 an expensive vehicle, and I imagine everybody else here probably spends about that on their car, right? Those are just examples of, like, depending on which statistic you want to look at or which piece of information you want to look at, that's the case, right? I think the other thing to note as we talk about, like, whether we have, whether this is even a good idea, regardless, right? You're absolutely right. Manufacturing batteries is more carbon intensive than manufacturing a gasoline-powered car. Absolutely. But under most conditions, driving that EV car is way better. So on the merit, you get better benefit from driving an EV. MIT has studies out on this, not me. It's not my information, it's MIT. And I would really appreciate it if we are going to make grand statements that we cite our sources, because I think that adds credibility. Otherwise, I'm just opining up here, right? So that's not fair. MIT has a great portal called Climate Portal at MIT that you can look at, and you can look at this information. And I bring it up because the irony of this whole thing is more people have to use the thing in order for it to do what it does, and it gets an exponential benefit on it, right? So when you think about load on a grid, you think about the fact that if we can pull from a variety of renewable sources like Xcel does today, and I'm going to throw nuclear into renewable. That's controversial as well, but since my wife is a nuclear engineer, she would kill me if I didn't say that. That nuclear, solar, hydroelectric, and wind power, they are variable, right? Nuclear power is the load base. So the more you can be pulling from that load base of renewable and the variability of that, the less you have to worry about the other sources. And the more cars that are out there that are pulling EV charging, the more load you are increasing. So it's actually this, like, beneficial symbiosis that happens, but we have to want to do it, okay? So we could take this plan and we could whittle it down and say, we're only gonna look at it for our own buildings and for our own fleet. I'd still think that that's a net benefit to the city, and maybe that's what we do first, because that's the only thing that we feel like we can control, and everywhere else we leave it up to the market, and that's fine by me. Like, I'm a market person too, that's great. I do want us to think about what happens when TIF districts or other, like, mechanisms that we use that are in fact infrastructure-based initiatives to drive economic development, if they want to include EV charging as part of an infrastructure development TIF in a particular development, and we don't have a plan, that would be disconcerting to me. So, like, these are just things I'm thinking about as we look at this, and none of them have to come to fruition and become a thing until we have decided on them as a body. But I think having a point of view on them makes sense. The last thing I'm going to say is, as long as we agree that that this is costing money and that governments should not, if we're saying we shouldn't subsidize stuff, I'd be very happy not to have us subsidizing the fossil fuel industry to the tune of $5.9 billion a year. So I could say that and be over here opining about that, but the fact of the matter is we still do that, right? So, let's let people in here give us points of view on specific areas, and we can knock them down or take them one by one as we move along. And I think the incremental approach is going to be the best way to handle this, because we will not know enough right away, and we will absolutely see this industry and its technology change multiple times over the course of a planning document like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Oh, and Mr. Mayor, in case you couldn't tell, I'm supportive.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Well, just my 2 cents. I think a couple of comments have touched on it. Basically, I think Councilmember D'Alessandro, I mean, you said if we said yes tonight, we're a couple of years out from actually doing anything, and it's probably going to change because the technology is changing, and I agree with that. I also agree if we don't do it, we're behind. I would argue that we're already behind, because there are cities with these in place. I understand concerns that have been brought up about whether it's access or the possibility of fire or whatever it is. We have templates to work off of. We can see good examples, we can see bad examples. Our work group can put our policy together, our plan together based on those, and I have faith in them. The notion that it will take time to do this, the other part of that is that it's going to take money to do this also. So as we talk about this, we can talk all we want, we can plan all we want until the dollar signs hit us in the face, and then we can decide whether or not we actually want to do this. Do we want the private market to simply take this on itself? Do we simply want to put a structure in place so private industry or nonprofits like churches or schools, do they want to put charging stations for their benefit within their parking lots. This planning document is just that. It's a planning document, and I think it's a powerful piece. It's the first step that we need to take in an industry that is here, and it's here to stay. I mean, yes, Ford cut their production in half, but the number of vehicles sold, EVs sold last year, was still like 1.5 million, 1.7 million vehicles were sold, and that number is not going down, it's going up. And so, yes, it's evolving. Yes, there's a lot of questions. I put faith in our planning group that is going to be putting this together. They have examples to work off of. They can find the best way forward to us, and it's not as though we're carving this in granite. We can adjust as we go. So I'm also in favor of this. I think it's a good step forward. It's not the final step forward, but I think it's a good step for us to take. Councilmember Lohman?
Well, if there's anything else, I'm ready to push this thing.
Council, is there anything else? Councilmember Lohman.
All right. Be happy to make a motion to accept the electrical vehicle infrastructure plan.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to accept the electric vehicle infrastructure plan as presented by staff.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
I don't know if this is possible, but because we don't have the data in here about like cold weather situations and all, I just want to pose, I know that staff said we'd look at that in the design area. Do we need to carve it out specifically, like, in our, where it has near term, medium term, long term? Should we be putting something explicit in there if we want it to be included in there? I'm open, but I wanted to just.
I think what we could do is pass this as stated here, with instructions to staff to do just what you've instructed.
Okay, great.
Just what you've said.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
rather than trying to, do this on the fly, basically what you've just said, we've given instructions to staff to do that kind of thing.
Okay, that's fine. So nothing needs to change then about the amendment. We'll just send the instructions along.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So we've got a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none. Council, all those in favor of item 4.3, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-1 with Councilmember Rivas in opposition. So thank you.
If I may, I believe that it's premature for us to be moving this fast. And I do understand that this should be a plan in place for the future. However, it's from what I have learned, just as Council member D'Alessandro mentioned that MIT had comments in regards to the benefits of electric vehicles. Caltech in California has the opposite comments in regards to it.
Exactly.
So based on that, I think we're moving too fast prematurely on this, and therefore I'm going to vote no on this.
And I think you just did, so very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for your comments, and thanks for your vote on that. So passed 5-1 with Councilmember Rivas in opposition. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hansen, for this. Looking forward to seeing where this progresses. We'll move on to item 4.4 on our agenda. This is another opportunity for public comment, and this is a resolution to accept our Penn Lake Management Framework. Mr. Greedle and Mr. Distel back again. We had this conversation, I think, earlier this month, and good conversation on this, and I think you've probably made a couple of tweaks. We'll have an opportunity for folks to hear about it, and turn it over to you. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to just go real quick, lightning fast brief on what we went over in our last presentation. So the Penn Lake Management Framework is what we're putting in front of you all. The framework is in itself only a procedure. It's just a set of instructions that we use to gather information to come up with a plan for management, and that's put into the community pathway. There was a question last time on the pathway draft that you all can see in your packet. That draft is there to show you what they would look like. It is not being confirmed if you accept the framework tonight. We're going to bring back the community group we have been working with this spring sometime if the framework's passed, and we'll go over the pathway to ensure that it's what we want, and we'll move forward there. So we are going to return to it with community input. The framework itself, it allows us to do adaptive management. It should allow us to do adaptive management over many years. It's not just a short-term plan. Again, it's just how we gather information and how we put that information into a really good, concise, efficient management plan for a 5-year cycle. And then the pathway, and that's not to be mistaken with the framework. The pathway is much more similar to what you see as a standard management plan. It contains the actual action items, which we will be prioritizing over a 5-year span, and we'll return and always keep updating and adjusting based on changing conditions. And that allows us to use money wisely and to react and benefit the ecology and community as best we can. And so the recommended motion is
Oh, I thought you were going to read the recommended motion.
No, I didn't want to read it. I figured you could read it. Yeah.
I can indeed. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you for that. Council questions. Mr. Distel, Mr. Greedle, Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. My question just around the continued community engagement and involvement in this, specifically because last time I made the comment that the drawings and the graphs and everything was very confusing to me, right? And I had time to sit down and read this, and then I could ask you questions. And recently we just had some residents, some neighbors come and say they're very excited about the work that we're going to do, but they're still very confused about what's going to happen. And so I just want to reiterate that and get an understanding of what our community engagement is going to be as we kick this off.
Yes, Mayor Bussey, council member, great question. We are putting a high value mark on community involvement. This is a weird moment because we are doing the framework and then we had that pathway at the same time, which shouldn't happen again in the future. It's just going to be these pathways. We had a lot of community involvement to gauge in how we could do this management framework. Again, that's just a procedure, and that procedure lays out and says you need to, at minimum, do community involvement every time you create a pathway. So at least we'll be returning back and getting that community involvement, which helps drive our management decisions. The framework, the pathway that we have now, we already have a really good functioning community group. I need their help too to come up with it. So we're going to come back to them. But what we're proud of in this is that unlike a lot of management plans that will just do a one-time community feedback and then come up with a plan, then you kind of just have to like play with that plan for a while. This one says you have to do it continuously so that that community aspect's always involved.
It's good to hear. Thank you for that. Council, additional questions? Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious if we can, and if Jack and Brian, you want to do this, if you were to summarize the goal of the current pathway that you've defined here, how would you, in an executive summary, define what you're hoping to attain from it in terms of either outcomes, goals, objectives? Can you help us with that? And I think this kind of goes to Councilmember Mua's point. I read it and I get it, but I also can't necessarily summarize it well for myself, and that means it's hard for me to summarize it well for people who ask me questions. So I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of bullet point, you know, this is a pathway to these outcomes, and at a very high level, what are they? Is that possible?
Yep.
Thanks.
Mayor, Councilmember, great question. It's difficult right now because we're so early on, and Penn Lake is a hard term, but some of the main bullet points is one, really functioning and cementing down our relationship with 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, who at this exact same time is doing their own management plan, so that we're working in tandem. To identify some infrastructure projects that we can look at. Infrastructure is always very expensive, takes a lot of planning, and so we're trying to kick that ball off and try to figure out which ones we can approach sooner than later and get that planning process started, because that's always been a big barrier to it. And one of the surefire things that popped up in the biotic survey we did was the effect of common carp and goldfish on the water quality of Penn. It's pretty well known that they have a huge impact on water quality. So trying to identify exactly what we can do for managing those, because fisheries was a high priority from the community, and that is it. So those would be the big ones. Kicking off infrastructure, partnership with 9 Mile, and fisheries starting work.
Other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Don't go far. We are going to open up this public comment opportunity on item 4.4. This is a resolution to accept the Penn Lake Management Framework. Is there anyone in the chambers who wishes to speak to item 4.4 this evening? Please come forward.
Mayor, City Council,
Good evening.
thank
Welcome.
you. Hi, my name is Lisa McIntyre. I'm here to provide testimony in support of the resolution to accept the Penn Lake Management Framework. I'm a resident on Lower Penn Lake, and I have been active in the Penn Lake Community Group that was formed by Jack Distel as part of this process. I reviewed the draft framework carefully, and I've emailed neighbors, and I provided comment at a meeting hosted by 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, as well as directly to Mr. Distel. Mr. Distel endeavored to respond to each of my comments, most often by making the revision that I suggested. Where my comments didn't result in a revision, I felt very comfortable with the information provided by Mr. Distel and his supervisor, Mr. Greedle. They've been very willing to discuss a wide variety of questions and comments on the framework and the management pathway, which I appreciate very much. I'm sensitive to the comments from my neighbors and from you about the complexity of the document, and I'm hoping that I have been able to navigate that complexity accurately. Trusting that I was, I'm comfortable with the content, and I support the methodology proposed, specifically the reasoned approach for assessing needs and evaluating solutions that it sets forth. Thus, I support the adoption of this document as the plan for managing Penn Lake through the watershed districts and the city's efforts to reduce total daily maximum load of phosphorus reaching the Minnesota River, and I encourage you to approve it tonight. I'd also support the preparation of a separate, simpler, plain English language document describing the plan in some detail for the public, so that you get a sense of which members of the audience are here in this matter. I ask the neighbors who agree with my comments and who would like you to approve this plan, to approve the framework, to raise your hands, to raise their hands, so that each person doesn't feel obligated to make additional testimony unless they have additional information that they want to provide. Thank you. And I don't know if there's a way for people watching online to raise hands too, but they could do that too. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you and provide this testimony.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre. Appreciate it. Thank you. The folks who raised their hand, you're still welcome to speak if you'd like. You don't have to. You raised your hand, so that will work as well. Anyone else wishing to speak? I'm seeing no one coming forward. And I'm not going to get burned again by trying to go to the guy on the phone, so we will. I am going to close the public comment opportunity on item 4.4 this evening, Council, and ask Council, are there any questions or comments or concerns regarding item 4.4? Councilmember Lohman.
More just a comment, Mayor. I just want to say, in my years of working with this particular area, this has just been an awesome process to watch take place, and just to see the level of engagement and just the, really in terms of how this whole thing was put together. I hope that this is a model for things we do in the future. I just really am impressed with this, and I just look forward to obviously I'm going to support this. So just hats off to the staff on this one. Congratulations.
Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would add is I would support the residents' recommendation for putting out a plain English plan. That would help me immensely and also them. So thank you.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
I wanted just to clarify what we're doing here, just because I know the resolution is to accept the Penn Lake Management Framework, but there's also the Penn Lake Management Pathway for 2024 to 2030 in here, and I just want to be sure. Are we passing separate resolutions there? Or are we passing one resolution? Does it cover both? And should the language reflect that? I'm just. I love it all, and I'm supportive of it, and I agree. I think we can do well to create executive summaries and other things like that. But I just want to be sure if we're going to see the pathway come back to us, because this is a draft or something, I'd like to know that so we know we're only, approving or supporting the framework, not the pathway at this time.
Mr. Distel?
Mayor Bussey, council member, good question. You are only approving the framework. The pathways will be certified by the city engineer at each showing, and we will follow that same procedure with this one. This is just a draft, and hopefully my Penn Lake community group will hold my feet to the fire, and when we come back together, we'll make sure it is what we want, and I will do a plain English, good, easy to follow one. So
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Council, no further comment. I'd look for action on item 4.4 this evening.
Happy to make the motion.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Yeah, I'd love that. I would make a motion to adopt the resolution accepting the Penn Lake Management Framework.
Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Rios, to accept the resolution adopting the Penn Lake Management Framework. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Thanks for the process, gentlemen. Well done, and looking forward to seeing as it moves forward. Thanks to the neighbors who were here this evening to talk with us as well. Thanks much. That will wrap up our hearings, resolutions, and ordinances for the evening. We're going to move on to item 5, our organizational business. And our first item tonight is item 5.1, recommendations regarding our cultural arts support grants funding revision. And Mr. Brecky is here. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you so much for having me. I am here to, as you said, discuss restructure and revision recommendations for our cultural arts support grant program. Before I dive in, I just wanted to provide a quick acronym guide. The city uses a lot of them, and I wanted to make sure we were on the same page before we got going. So if you're watching at home, maybe take a screenshot or something so we have this. CAS is our shorthand for Cultural Arts Support, our grant program. BCA is the shorthand for our Center for the Arts. And RAO is our Resident Arts Organization, which we have 7 of. BFAC, the shorthand there, is the previous name for the RAOs. It's what they used to go by. The Metropolitan Regional Arts Council is MRAC. We have BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, Persons of Color, and then LGBTQIA Two-Spirit. Two-Spirit is the newest addition to this. This is someone that has Native American heritage that identifies as having both masculine and feminine spirits. So there you go, acronyms. Brief history of our CAS program. The city has allocated art support funding since the 1960s and 70s. From 1994 to 2010, Bloomington Fine Arts Council distributed these CAS funds to its member organizations. In 2011, there was a grant application process that was implemented. And in 2020 and 21, this grant process was heavily revised. Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office weighed in with their expertise, and our first non-resident arts organization applications started to come in. In 2023, we awarded our first non-REO recipient with this grant. So these are some of the difficulties that this program currently faces, and I'd like to start with just the history of CAS. Cultural arts support, that terminology and the language of that, that has been tied to our RAOs for nearly 60 years. They have been the exclusive applicants and the recipients of this up until very recently. Understandably, the RAO structures rely very heavily on this CAS for survival. There's a historical precedent as to why that would make perfect sense, that we would make it to this point and that they would be relying on this funding. Under the current program, the RAOs compete against outside applicants. However, the RAOs have this very unique relationship with the city based on, again, historical context, but also their existing lease agreements. They've provided me the feedback that the city is sending a mixed message in their support with this program, that the city wants sustainable arts partnerships, and yet they are threatened by the potential loss of funding through this program that they do rely on for their survival. We've also received feedback that the CAS application process is long and difficult, especially for the dollar amounts that are being asked for. We are also in the reality that we are facing presentation of these awards and this discussion as a contentious process with contentious outcomes, which ultimately is just a publicly negative view of arts funding. The arts face a lot of challenges right now. Adding that to the mix is very difficult, and everyone involved in this we fear the risk of reduced interest in public funding of the arts over time if this remains a contentious process. CAS has always had an all-volunteer panel, and we have found that there is some inconsistency in financial status review based on this. Not everybody that is asked to volunteer for this panel is a tax expert or a financial expert, nor should they be, frankly, to serve on this panel. So it has been difficult to score and rank accurately and also maintain year-to-year equitable practice in this category. The city does also face larger questions like, what does it mean to be an RAO? How does a nonprofit organization become an RAO? And will a current RAO ever lose their status with the city? And if so, how? These have not been answered comprehensively to date, and I think they're actually at the crux of this entire conversation, that these things need to be defined over time. And finally here, BCA's ability to align with 5-year strategic planning priorities is limited. Based in this current program, we do have limited options to welcome new arts partners to the city. So here's some needs that have been identified. We do need to provide clear definition to the city's current and future relationship with RAOs. We need a revised CAS process with the umbrella goals to funding of the arts presented as a positive, inspirational message to the city. No other surrounding communities support the arts like Bloomington does. That should be trumpeted from the mountaintops. I think this needs to be a point of pride for the city, and this is something that other cities should be copying and referencing in their own support of the arts. That is all about messaging. We do need to avoid mixed messaging of arts support and contentious public presentations. Simplifying this process will lead to greater accessibility for all communities. And I think as a target, we need greater service to underserved, historically marginalized communities. I have asked for direct review of CAS application financial documentation by city departments like finance and legal, and primarily the tax document review for validity. I think this is just a first step in this process to make sure that this is a valid application before it goes to any panel, is ranked in any way. Just pass it through our existing departments and use those resources. I'd also like to incorporate City Council feedback or involvement in the review process earlier than public presentation, potentially having one of you serve on our review panel annually as part of this process. I'd like to honor the historical context and the relationships of the current RAOs in city funding and organization, while simultaneously gaining new arts partners. We need to provide an on-ramp for potential future RAOs to the city, and we will also be providing a rubric for Bloomington-based impact during the review process, which is a request of our panelists that have served prior. So what is being proposed tonight is a separation of these grant processes into 2 applicant pools. Grant number 1 would become the Resident Arts Support Grant, or the RAS grant, to add yet another acronym to our pool. This is a $182,000 allotment, which is the totality of the allotment for this program from 2019 to 2022. This is to not change over a 5-year period except for inflation adjustments. The maximum award would remain at 30% of an operating budget, or $80,000, whichever is less. The additional funding, if there is any left over from this program, would transfer into the BCA Performance Series programming budget, just so BCA has the opportunity to program further arts partners as able. The RAOs would follow an identical grant application and panel review process, but they are reviewed separately from grant number 2 applicants. This buys the city a 5-year window to further define and clarify RAO relationships to the city. And if there is earlier council member involvement, again, based on historical precedent, I would look for I would look for having this approved annually via consent business. Grant number 2 has the working title Blooming Arts Partnerships Grant. This is a $40,000 allotment, which captures the budget increases of the last 2 years to the totality of this program. So the budget would not change. It's just being split. Also set to 5 years, except for inflation adjustments. The maximum award, again, 30% of an operating budget, or $10,000. Additional funding would again transfer into the BCA Performance Series. Anyone may apply and receive for up to all 5 years. There would be a direct focus in awarding to the 5-year strategic planning priorities that we have stated. This builds the city a 5-year window to add additional arts partnerships. Now, this is a big one. After 5 years, any multi-year recipient of this grant may be considered for RAO application and status. This is a process that the city needs to develop. We don't have one right now because we haven't answered the question of how does one become an RAO. This is a 5-year window to try to develop that language and that program. Because these are new arts partners, we would be awarded via council presentation and organizational business, which this program has been traditionally. Both grants would incorporate simplified application processes, financial review by the city departments, any other procedural changes as approved tonight. And if approved, the city would be welcoming new RAOs on January 1st, 2029. Also speaking to our review panel that I mentioned before, we would like to standardize this for consistency with 6 annual appointments made by our city manager. There would be a city council representative, a creative placemaking representative, a park commissioner, 1 additional city staff that would rotate, and 2 Bloomington-based artists. This role would continue to serve in a non-voting manner, and then the City of Bloomington financial review would be a piece of this as well. And finally, this is our proposed timeline. The 2024 summary there is everything I've said tonight, essentially, of what we would be looking to do this year. In 2025, we would be looking at additional grants and languages and looking at potential overhauls as needed, again, just with further research into other programs and processes. In 2026, we would be hoping to have RAO parameters fully defined by the city and shared going into the next 2-year lease agreement cycle. 2028 in that calendar year would be when we would be considering new RAOs going into that hopeful deadline of January 1st, 2029, which we would potentially be welcoming new RAOs to the city of Bloomington. So with that, I welcome your questions, feedback, and would be looking for a motion to approve the changes as proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Brecky. Council questions, thoughts on this? Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got several questions, so I'll just ask a few, and then I'll let my colleagues ask questions, and I'll see if they have similar questions. So if I saw in the slide, I didn't see it in the presentation when I was reading through in the packet with the BCA in terms of the money. Can you help me understand how money flows from either of these 2 grants to the BCA, which is my understanding is the Bloomington Council for Arts or back to the city of Bloomington?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. So BCA being Center for the Arts. And so instead of, there may be a mix-up of BFAC, which was the other one. But so the BCA, it would stay within the Center for the Arts budget, essentially. And it would be used for further programming options throughout the year.
So take me through that process in terms of, let's say you've got, was it 180, 182, something to that effect, that would come through that first grant pool, and then there's another, X amount of money that's through that piece. So those dollars are then distributed amongst those individual organizations, and so let's say that they're not distributed. Where does that money go from either of those two pools? Does it remain in those pools and carry through the next year, or does it then carry through to the city?
Councilmember Lohman, the intent of that would be to spend that money within the calendar year, welcoming additional arts partners through our programming options in the city. So that would mean Schneider Theater performances, black box performances, performances that may be free to the public, which is one of the personal goals that I have, is offering more free performances. So it would stay within the Center for the Arts budget. However, it would basically transfer from one category to another, just into a programming budget.
So then just one other question.
Actually, Mr. Verbrugge, I think, has something to add to that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman, as Mr. Brecky said, the intent is to have those funds be available if they aren't allocated for other programming. I think the question I hear Councilmember Lohman asking is what happens to those funds if they aren't allocated, right? So if we don't have additional performance series, those funds would stay within the BCA fund because that's a separate operating fund just for the Center of the Arts. They wouldn't come back out at some point. They'd just stay in there for future use or go to the fund balance or however that works out at the end of the year.
Okay, so that would not go back to those organizations. That would be rolled back into the city. And then my second question, and then I'll let my other colleagues ask other questions, so I noticed here that in terms of the appointment process for this, I have never seen, other than, okay, now I'm lying on this one because I can think of one now off the top of my head, but it's not usual that we have the city manager appointing this. And so if you could help me understand how that makes sense or how that rationale was how that come to be.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mr. Mayor and council members. Councilmember Lohman, that wasn't Ian's recommendation. That was my recommendation. And the reason is just trying to streamline the process, right? Because when we have a council appointment process, we go through a whole application and interview and scoring and everything else. This is very specific membership with a finite pool. And so it's really working with like the Creative Placemaking Commission and the City Council to say which of the members would like to be involved in this and just streamlining it that way, right? And then our staff knows artists in the community, right? And so relying on some of the relationships we have to bring people into the process, it just allows this process to move a little bit more smoothly than the months-long process it goes taking to appoint people to council-appointed seats.
So with that being said, given my first question, is there any concern with where the money flows with the first part and with your you're appointing the second piece, there being any conflict there? I'm just very concerned with the way that structure can be construed or misunderstood to have a conflict there, with that. So I just want to put that out there because that's one of the things I'm a little bit concerned about with the structure.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman. For my own part, I don't think that there is a conflict there. I think what we would make sure to do is know that if any of these individuals or the sort of the seats have some sort of a relationship with a grant applicant, that we would not have that individual serving in that capacity, somebody who had a conflict, right? Because we have other members on the City Council, we have other members on the Creative Placemaking Commission, right? And so, we'll be intentional about avoiding those kind of conflicts up front. The ultimate decision on these is still going to come to the City Council in the form of recommendations. So the whole council still maintains that authority.
Good for now? Okay. Additional questions, Council? Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't see anything in here about how an RAO, I think you mentioned it in your questions at the front, but in the back in terms of the recommendations or the process that you'll use to define an RAO. I want to assume that we're also going to have a commentary there about what is the criteria by which an RAO might lose that status. And I didn't see that explicitly framed out, but can you confirm for me that you're considering that as part of the process?
Councilmember D'Alessandro, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be part of our 5-year review process of trying to define and answer these specific questions so the city is clear about their expectations. But also, I do not feel that we can successfully add anybody, but successfully, if it came to it, if anyone were to be removed as an RAO, how would that work? There's no precedent for this whatsoever. And so we do need a window of time to define and answer these questions with that included.
Great. Second question, I know that there are lease agreements, or do all RAOs have lease agreements? Is that a criteria that by which we confirm RAO status or not? Like, can you just describe of the 7 that we have, how many have lease agreements today? You know, is it all of them? Do they have to have them, et cetera? Just, I'm asking that because it feels like almost like an artist in residence kind of thing, which implies that we're providing some place to store and everything. But I didn't see that framework either, and I didn't see it in the definition of residence arts organization. So if you could define that for me, I'd be happy to have some more information on that.
As best I can tell to this point, the one true defining characteristic of a resident arts organization is that existing lease agreement with the city, which used to be an annual process and was recently changed to a 2-year process. But the existing lease agreement and then the things that come with that, like in-kind use of facilities and some of the other things that are negotiated as part of that, plus the historical precedent of these groups have been serving the city for decades, that's really what we have to date of what is an RAO. So the lease agreements exist for all 7 and have for several years. That's really the answer to it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm wondering if we need to make sure that we consider, Mr. Mayor, the idea that lease agreement, because I'm assuming that it's a no-cost lease agreement. We don't charge them for anything, especially if they're coming back around and asking for a grant. It would be kind of silly to be charging rent out of that. So I think we should include that in the total, for lack of a better way to put it, in the total contribution we're making to those arts organizations. So I don't know if we can put a price on that, or if we want to define it by square footage or whatever. But a criteria for being a residence art organization is that the city would supply X number of square feet of whatever you want to use it for in residence. Might be a thing to think about. So that was another thing. And then the last thing was I know that we did talk about the form and like the application process, but I don't know if we're going to, if that's something that's happening here in 2024, if that's a short-term item, and if you could describe a little bit about the areas of the form that you're looking at. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councilmember D'Alessandro. So we do have drafts ready to go of this existing split in the program, and one of the biggest things that needed to happen was take a document that essentially started in 2011 and went through a couple rounds of revision and clean it up and make sure that it's modernized. So going through and taking apart and removing any of the redundancies that existed within that, digitizing the form so we can make sure that it's actually fillable as a PDF instead of printing it out, writing on hand, scanning it, emailing it back to the city. We're not going to do those things anymore. So modernizing it, and this is part of accessibility again, and just making sure that anybody can access this freely and simplifying our process. I have also gone through and just reduced the number of overall questions and not changing a lot of the terminology. This is going to be a multi-year process to update the grant language and overhaul all of that. But overall, the simplification of the form and the modernization of the form was the goal for 2024. The existing attachments that have been a part of this previously, those have not changed at all, and that would continue into 2024.
Last thing on the modernization. If I'm an RAO, I'm assuming that my information most of my information, like the application information, hasn't changed much. Are we making sure that if they are the RAO that we're not asking them to repeat themselves every 2 years or every year? Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Verbrugge, did you have something to add regarding the lease arrangement?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember D'Alessandro, I think it's a good point. We have in the past with artistry, done a calculation on in-kind for space and other things, and that was because of the more substantial contract that we had with them outside of the CAS process. But so there are kind of two things to that issue about having sort of the lease agreement as part of an REO relationship. One is that space here is is a prized commodity, right? And we already have a challenge accommodating our RAOs. So, for example, Bloomington Symphony Orchestra is doing most of their performances at the Masonic Center rather than here. Scheduling for the theater and the rehearsal room and the other spaces is tough to do with the growing number of participants and the interest in those RAOs to grow as well, which is why we talked a couple years ago about potentially doing an expansion of the Center for the Arts, and backed away from that when some conditions changed over the last few years. But that still exists. The space is always going to be a bit of a challenge for Ian to make sure that he is keeping our RAOs happy, and I think there's a way for us to account for that in terms of how we document our support for our resident arts organizations.
Councilmember Muat.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, are we going to have a limit on RAOs? Or is it going to be a process where like one comes in and one has to go out? Because I can see in the future, especially if we're continuing to maintain the same grant pool of money, where we end up with 14 RAOs and we're drawing from that same pool, and we have that same conflict of, oh, we're the old established RAO, that's like our grant funding, this is the new RAO, we're an RAO now too, so we get that funding. And so that's my question, like, is there going to be a process where one comes in, one goes out?
Yeah, Councilmember Mua and Council, so I really view this as a starting point that will welcome feedback throughout the process. This is a 5-year plan, so we have a plan, and so that we have a window of time to further define these parameters and develop these procedures where they don't currently exist. But I do not see any way forward where you could say one in, one out with RAOs with Definity tonight or anything of the sort. It really is a process that's going to develop over time, I think. 5 years is a very short amount of time, but it's also a very long amount of time, and we don't know the status of the RAOs over those 5 years. We don't know the status of the applicants to the new process, if adopted. So it really is a window of time just to see how this works, let the city do its work to develop this program further, and reevaluate as we go with your feedback along the way, because I don't have all the answers, certainly. I need feedback to operate.
And then I wonder if it makes sense just to set a limit, because we know these folks are going to come back every year and ask. If they're an RAO, this is what you get. So there's some stability of, we know what we're going to get on a year-to-year basis. And then we know how to budget on a year-to-year basis. And then that gives us the ability then to contribute to new organizations and support them as they continue to grow, and then have that kind of stabilization as they become a resident arts organization. Specifically because we've talked about, when we give these grants out, we want to give out all of the money so that we can continue to support the arts. So it doesn't make sense for me to continue to jump through hoops to get possibly the same or less than what you got last year. So just a thought.
Mr. Brugge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Councilmember Mua, that's a good point. We've held the amount of funding for the arts organizations basically flat for a couple of years, right? And so their costs have inflationary pressure too, right? That's just sort of how it goes. The thing about the arts organizations is we don't see them having substantial growth in their operating budget, and these grants can't be any more than 30% of their operating budget, right? So I think that as Ian continues to work with them and understands what their needs are and sees how they're growing based on participation or number of performances, whatever that is, that we'll be able to have a good feel for how that's developing from year to year. And then the council can always make a choice about what is the right level of funding for the grant pool from a year-to-year basis as well.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple quick questions here. So the 222,000, that's consistent with what we did in the budget for this year?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What is the mechanism by which the budget can't change for 5 years? Because I'm a little bit concerned that we don't know what's going to happen. You know, if there was a reason that we just didn't have that ability or something like that, you know, it seems like something the council supports, but, you know, there's reasons that, you know, a future council may want to change it, and I'm concerned about tying their hands.
Councilmember Nelson, that was actually something the city manager and I discussed as how does this flex around as needed. The spirit of the split and fixing it to a 5-year is actually percent of the budget rather than I guess total dollar amounts. So it may make more sense to say whatever 182,000 is compared to 222,000, that the X percent amount of the budget is fixed for RAO use, and flexing of the budget up or down would stay consistent in that regard, rather than the dollar amounts being fixed. So that was definitely a consideration and discussed pretty heavily.
Okay.
Mr. Verbrugge?
Yeah, I would also add, Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Nelson, that our city attorney would tell you that you can't tie the hands of future councils, right? And so a future council can do whatever they deem appropriate and reasonable at the time that they take action. So the part of the thought process is to just forecast that for this 5-year period, we're going to have predictability in terms of what that grant funding pool availability is going to be, so everybody knows what the lay of the land is. One of the things that I think the council heard last year from our incumbent organizations that essentially rely on the grants because they have for many years is uncertainty around what it means to have funding for new entrants into our market, right? And whether that that funding is going to perhaps threaten theirs. So what we tried to do in designing this recommendation is make sure that there is predictability and there's assurance for our RAOs that that partnership will continue.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. That makes sense, that it's the projections that go into our budget. And so, okay. And then also to Councilmember Mua's point with regards to the number of RAOs and to what City Manager Verbrugge said about spaces at a premium. I mean, I understand the idea of generating new and helping support new ones, but I'm very concerned we have the capacity. I mean, I don't know where they're going to go, what they're going to do, how they're going to do that as we go forward. And I think we just have to be, I think, a little bit more realistic about that. I mean, because I think we did one last year and it was like 5,000. That if we get 8 of them, where are they going to go? I mean, we just don't have that. And so to encourage this, so that's the part that I'm most struggling with is the Blooming Arts partner. I don't want to block people out, but I just don't know that we have the space or the capacity or anything like that to actually welcome them in, much less move them up into an RAO status where, now they have, access to even greater support from the community.
And Councilmember Nelson, just to comment on that, this has been so discussed and considered, and the struggle with this is equity and welcoming all of Bloomington to this space, and how do we welcome everyone, and how does one become an RAO? Again, going back to those definitions that the city needs of who is an RAO, how do you become an RAO, does anyone ever not have RAO status in the future? Without those, it is so difficult to put any parameters around this. But we, as the person that does the schedule for this place, and especially Schneider Theater, I mean, it is full. We are booked 330 plus days out of the year, and over a year out, and it is very difficult to envision trying to add an additional RAO 5 years from now with just our current resources. I do think that the window of time is still extremely important to try to define these things. I think it is a living document in a sense of we need to continue this discussion and further this discussion of how does all of that work in the next 5 years, or come 2029, where do people fit? I do also reiterate that 5 years can be a long amount of time, and especially in nonprofits within the arts right now, we just don't have certainty with the futures of a lot of the nonprofits, and so we just don't know for sure what is going to happen over that period of time. So it's a really difficult thing to just define clearly and put parameters on, because we just don't have enough to go off of right now.
Mr. Brugge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Councilmember Nelson, appreciate the comments. We want the Center for the Arts to be the epicenter of arts here in Bloomington, and we also recognize that there are other venues that may be available, in the same way that some of the RAOs have already chosen other places. I would say that that opportunity may exist for new entrants as well, as they may want to try other spaces first before they become a regular fixture or regularly scheduled component of what happens here at the center. Think about some of the things that have happened with creative placemaking in the South Loop, and how that potentially may lead to an ongoing relationship of doing community-based performance art somewhere out in, whether it's outdoor venues or, we did parking ramps and other things out there before. So I think there's, depending on what the market is and what the interest is, I think there are different opportunities we can look at that aren't solely reliant on the space here in the center.
Councilmember Lohman?
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a bunch of questions, and I know I talked with the manager earlier today, so I'm just going to go through my comments. We can save the questions and stuff for later on, another date. But, in terms of, we talk about financial viability, and especially when we talk about equity and inclusion, I think one of the worst things we can do is bring these organizations into some dependency with this particular program and then cut the cord on them, especially since we're trying to push forward with equity and inclusion. So I think we need to be very careful with that as we move through this, because that could really damage those organizations. There's a history here that we've had with the city. This whole dialogue that we have between the city policies and Bloomington Center for the Arts. I think it's a unique history, and even in the history of how we've got those funds and those dollars that are even there, that endowment that is there. And so as I look to that future, I told the manager earlier, boy, I don't really want to support this. I don't like where this is written right here today, but I'm starting to come around on this, even as I sit here today. One of the things I'd like to see us do is, I just think we need to be really clear with and very transparent with our art organizations in terms of reporting what dollars are spent in each one of those categories, and what money that ends up going to the city each year, so that we're all very clear about what happens there with that. I continue to be concerned with that, that allocation. Not a big supporter of that. I'd like to see our monies going out and being directed by these individual organizations, but I too can learn. As an old dog, I'm willing to listen to new ideas. And then, as we've done with our fire pension, if we've done and my work with Rotary, I'd love to see us to begin to start, if it's legal, of course, looking down there at our lawyer, to try to figure out ways to endow both these programs and some of these dollars for future generations, so that we can move some of these existing organizations that are in the city, maybe off of the current funds that we have now, and then move in new, so we can support that financial or fiscal viability of these new organizations as we talk about equity and inclusion, how we make that happen. And then I think that's it. And I do see why the city manager makes sense to do that. I guess I put this down here as a note, because the city manager has a great deal of experience in the arts, and I don't want to discount that either. So.
Council, anything else? No? Very good. Councilmember D'Alessandro.
I just wanted to, I think Mr. Verbrugge kind of stated what I was going to comment on, so maybe I should not comment on it. But I think we have an opportunity here with some of these emerging art organizations to be creative about where they produce their art in the city. And, you know, I know, for example, over the summertime, I was talking to one organization, and, you know, I believe I was talking with Ms. Hughes about the fact that the Black Box Theater isn't as well programmed as the Schneider Theater, for example. So, you know, finding ways to target and cultivate organizations that might have use for the facilities that are more available is an opportunity for us. You know, coming up with a residence arts organizations, for example, that only does stuff in the parks in the summertime, which I think would be amazing. Like, you know, there's lots of ways to look at residence arts organizations that don't have to be that they have footage, you know, square footage within the walls of the BFAC. So, BCAF. I got it wrong. Sorry.
Couldn't agree more.
BCFA, is that right now? Did I get it right? BFAC.
BCA.
BCA, just BCA,
Yep.
no F in there. Gotcha. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, council member. And with you, Mr. Verbrugge, I think there are plenty of there are creative ways we could look at this as an opportunity, whether it's through the schools, whether it's through our outdoor venues, whether it's at the Masonic Home, whether it's that big old mall we got. I mean, there are different possibilities that we could look for opportunities. I want to get this to completion. I do want to say a couple of things, though. First of all, couldn't agree with you more about the need to shout this from the rooftops. This is a point of pride for Bloomington, and we need to talk about it in that way. And I feel bad that it wasn't felt like that in recent years, and that our arts organizations thought this was an acrimonious process in some way, because there was no acrimony there. I think we were looking for information, trying to do this as best we could, and so this was never meant to be a problem. This was a great thing to have in the city of Bloomington, and I appreciate the work that you have done to try and find a way to move this forward, and I think the problems that we have talked about here are manageable. I agree we've got a space crunch, but we do have other space opportunities. These emerging arts organizations, you know, we've been talking about this for 5 years for emerging arts organizations, and I think we have one to show for it, and so to look for ways that we could do that, to foster folks, to get groups involved, to really bring them along as best we can, because you're right, it's got to reflect all of Bloomington, and we've got to do a better job of that. And ultimately, this is, as you said, as we all know, this is a feather in Bloomington's cap, and has been for 50 years. And we would be remiss if we didn't support this and find a way to make this work and iron out issues that might exist, and look for ways to really make this a continued success in the city of Bloomington. So thank you for your work on this. Thank you for your work on this. Council, with that, I seem to hear some unanimity, or at least near unanimity, in support of this. I would look for a motion to approve the revisions to the Cultural Arts Support Grant process as proposed by the Center for the Arts staff.
I'll do that reluctantly, but yes, I'll move it.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember Mua, to approve the revisions to the Cultural Arts Support Grant process as proposed by the Center for the Arts staff. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing this move forward and where we end up with this. Council, the clock on the wall tells me it's 9:03. We still have 3 rather lengthy things to get through this evening, so maybe keep your questions, your comments, your ideas in mind as we look at the clock, as you consider some of the comments that you would have to make on our last couple items here. Item 5.2 is a conveyance of Hyland Greens Golf Course to the Three Rivers Park District. Our Park and Rec Director, Ann Catry, is here. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. We have before you this evening a proposal to convey ownership of Hyland Greens Golf Course to the Three Rivers Park District. And first I want to recognize some folks that I have with me in the room this evening. You'll hear from them a little bit later in the presentation, but Bo Carlson, the Superintendent of Three Rivers Park District, is with us this evening, as is John Gibbs, the Chair of the Three Rivers Park District Board. And I just want to say I have nothing but the most tremendous respect for the organization. Three Rivers Park District is one of the premier parks districts in the entire country, and Bo leads that organization extremely well. So I'm very pleased to have the partnership that we've had with them and have them with us here this evening. So I'm going to get through this fairly quickly as well. I know that you all are very familiar with the partnership that we have with Three Rivers Park District. Just a little bit of history. First of all, the city purchased Hyland Greens Golf Course 50 years ago this year. And a few other notable things that have happened in the recent history is in 2012, the 18-hole course was converted to a 9-hole course, and the driving range changed to the center of the course so that it could expand. In 2015 and 2016, the council commissioned the Hyland Greens Task Force. They made a variety of different recommendations regarding operations and the property itself. The city operated Hyland Greens Golf Course until 2020 when it was closed due to COVID-19. That year, the city council commissioned the Community Budget Advisory Commission, and they made some recommendations that we continue to expand conversations about potential partnerships, specifically with Three Rivers Park District for the operation of Hyland Greens Golf Course. We did that, and in 2021, we entered into an agreement with Three Rivers Park District to operate the golf course, and we just completed in December of 2023 the first 3-year term of that agreement. I'd like to note that going into this agreement, the city was well aware that there was a lot of capital investment that was needed in this golf course, and the city council directed city staff and Three Rivers Park District staff to review the capital investment that was needed and to bring a proposal to the city sometime after the first term of the agreement. That's precisely why we're here this evening. I just wanted to highlight, and I don't want to put words in the mouth of our representatives from Three Rivers, but we owned this property for a long time too. We're well aware of some of the issues that exist there. We have significant issues with the clubhouse. The age and the condition of the clubhouse, it has a leaky roof. HVAC is on the roof, causing a variety of different issues. There are a variety of different ADA accessibility issues, including getting up to the clubhouse, stepping into the clubhouse, and the restrooms in the clubhouse. Additional capital investment challenges at that site are some HVAC at the maintenance shop, the irrigation system. The irrigation system at the golf course is original, and Three Rivers had some issues, significant issues where they had to actually salvage parts from one of their other golf courses to keep the irrigation system operational there. As you know, without an irrigation system at a golf course, it'll probably last about a week or two, especially with the dry summers that we've had. There is a new computer software needed for the irrigation system. Some new pieces of maintenance equipment are needed at the site. Some netting, some signage, fencing on Normandale Boulevard that you all are very well aware of, and the condition of the parking lot is poor. Some of the key points. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Three Rivers Park District did an exceptional job operating the golf course over the last 3 years. I can honestly tell you I have had nothing but very positive comments from golfers, from neighbors, from people that have used the facility. In considering the conveyance of the property to Three Rivers, we have discussed several key points that I would like to highlight here this evening. The district will maintain Hyland Greens as a golf course. The district is willing to invest the necessary capital funds into the course with a commitment to the city for long-term operation and maintenance of the facility. The district is committed to affordable recreation activities for everyone. The district offers lessons, leagues, and a first tee program that really generates golf for the entire city and is a great feeder program for Dwan as well. The district will also explore recreational opportunities for the old driving range site that has sat vacant for the last 3 years. And the district is also open to considering year-round access to the property for potential winter recreational opportunities. So tonight we are seeking council direction for the potential conveyance of the golf course property to Three Rivers Park District. This transfer in ownership would require a public hearing by the City Council. If the council is interested, staff is recommending holding the public hearing on February 26th. In February, the staff would do a wide variety of outreach to property owners within 1,000 feet. We would do a Let's Talk Bloomington survey about this potential, and we would advertise that in a variety of different ways, including social media, email, Nextdoor, our monument signs, and we would post a notice in the Sun Current. So next, I would like to bring forward John and or Bo, if they would like to make a few comments for the council this evening. Hello, John.
Thank you, Ann. John Gibbs, Chair of the Three Rivers Park Board, and just want to not repeat anything Ann said. We appreciate that report, and I heard the admonition, Mayor, on time. So on behalf of our golf group, they really have loved the opportunity to reopen and, in a stable manner, operate golf at Hyland Greens, and 2 of the 3 years have been financially successful as well. So we are very, very open to marching forward. We know it can't be run without capital, but there's an advantage to having half a dozen golf courses. There are genuine economies of scale and synergies between them, and so we're confident that if it's the desire of the city, we would be able to successfully operate Hyland Greens, and we look forward to doing it. Bo Carlson is the superintendent, and Ann almost understated. He is truly the most well-regarded park regional agency person I know of, and that's not to exclude Ann. He's got just a certain kind of a job, and he's just recognized around the country, and we're thankful for him, and he'll answer any old question that you ask him unhesitatingly. So we're here. Thank you.
Well, Chair Gibbs, thanks for being here this evening, and thanks for sticking it out with us. I appreciate that, and thanks for the ongoing conversation between our 2 organizations to look at this as a possibility, and considering all of the fantastic partnerships that our 2 organizations already have. It's greatly appreciated. So great to have you here, and Bo, good to see you as well. Thanks for being here tonight.
Mayor, if I could just mention one other thing, and John mentioned as well that 2 of the 3 years they operated the golf course, they operated at a profit. I think it's important to note that in 2021, it was a really difficult year coming out of COVID, and they did an exceptional job. It was hard to hire staff. They weren't able to run the lesson program that they wanted. But even with the 2 years of positive budget, I think it's really important to note that operating that facility is never going to generate enough money to pay for the capital investment that's needed at that facility. That's why a partnership like this would be so valuable to the city, because they're willing to invest additional funds into the golf course. So with that, we have action requested this evening to direct staff to hold a public hearing on February 26th.
Thank you very much for this. Thanks for the information. Council, questions on this? I know this is something that has, I think, it's been bubbling a while, and we've been talking about it, I think, offline a little bit, but this is our first opportunity to really talk about it publicly and to decide whether or not we do want to move forward with a public hearing in February regarding this. Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll be quick on this time, actually. I just want to make sure people understand this also includes the 10 acres that's vacant so that they could put it into recreational programming, so that would not then be available for, housing or other type of development like that. Is that accurate?
Councilmember Nelson, members of the council, yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, why only the fencing on Normandale?
I think all fencing is open for consideration, Councilmember Nelson.
Council, additional thoughts? Councilmember Lohman?
Yep. So, roughly, I don't know, is it 4 or 5 years ago, we had a study that had come before the council, and the question I'm asking is around control of this from a long-term perspective and a demographic perspective. And I'll certainly let John work on me external to this meeting. Be happy to have conversations with you. But I'm concerned with some of the reports that I saw during that last Hyland Greens piece around the demographics within that and the changing demographics of Bloomington. And I look at what the school with the stadium with no parking, and so if if this were to change in the future, and for some reason that Hyland with the driving range and this piece as a feeder were no longer there, it would also put to jeopardy our Dewan from a long-term perspective. And so to just in summary. My concerns about this, I certainly think we should go to a public hearing, but by giving this up long term, we do tie the hands of future policymakers, like the school board found themselves with stadiums and having to build two different stadiums. So I'm concerned about this because it gives us a joint or a two different disjointed golf program, and I'm just at this point I can't support this the way this is currently arranged.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, for one, think this is a great idea. I think, number one, I love Hyland. I prefer it to Dewan just because I'd never have enough time to do 18 holes, and so 9 is perfect for me. And I'm grateful for that. Also, I do a lot of anger management at the driving range, so that's wonderful. So appreciate it very much. Obviously, the Three Rivers Park District folks are great at what they do. I absolutely, having been there in 2018, 2019, and then in 2021, 22, 23, like there was a market difference. Like even COVID notwithstanding, there was a market difference between the experience that I had at when it was run by the city and the experience I had as it was operated by Three Rivers, and I think that that's great. Like I think that that's great for the city. I think that we would increase the cachet of the amenity. I think we will get better services. We have talked as a council. This is maybe new for Councilmember Rivas, but we've talked as a council in the last 2 years several times about our enterprise accounts, and break even or better is our goal. But this is an opportunity for us to take one of those off the books, and I think that that's a good thing for the residents of Bloomington as well. So I'm in support of this. I think this is great. I absolutely understand that there's more work to be done to make sure we get it right, and the hearing will help us with that because we'll get a lot of good resident and golfer input on that. But I'm for one excited about it. I think we'll get. I can't think of a reason not to do it at this point in my head. I recognize that, yep, it maintains its status as a recreational amenity. It doesn't necessarily have to stay golf, but that's the business that they're in. If Three Rivers came to us at one point and said, hey, 50 years from now, like, golf isn't it. It's like, I don't know, ultimate Frisbee. Then they'd have the opportunity to do that. Right, and we're not tying their hands to that, I don't believe. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. I really am. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work on yet another beautiful piece of Bloomington with the folks at Three Rivers. Thanks.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that's the difficult part, right? Because if we convey this to Three Rivers, and I want to just applaud the work that Three Rivers has done. They have been fantastic partners, and I recognize that and fully appreciate that. And I know that if we convey this to the Three Rivers, it's going to stay with their mission. It's going to continue to be green space. We're going to follow the steps of our forefathers who split and ensured that a third of Bloomington remains green space. So that works with our history and what we value here in Bloomington. But I also look at the issues that have come up with what the school district's going through and the fact that we just don't have any more land in Bloomington. This is one of the last open spaces that is undeveloped. And if we were any other city that could go buy up a farm field and build more, we could. And so I'm torn because I want to continue to support the green space that we have, but I don't want to tie the hands of future councils because in 30 or 50 years, I'm not going to be here. And they're going to be restricted with what we choose to do today. And so it's going to be, I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have with it. But it is a difficult one, and not one to say that we don't have that great relationship or we're thinking differently, but it's it's a difficult decision for sure.
Councilmember Rivas.
To the surprise of everybody, I think I support this 100%. I think as long as we get the guarantee that that location will never be developed into commercial buildings or anything like that, I think I'm 100% for it. As Councilmember D'Alessandro mentioned, the experience from previously, not to say that the city wasn't running it properly, but the experience playing in there the last couple of years compared to before has been a great improvement. And you know, despite the fact that I haven't been involved with the councils that long, I was researching this previously when I learned that it was being discussed. So I'm 100% behind it. I think it will be a good opportunity for the city to perhaps use funds that could go into this place in other opportunities. So, with that, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, sorry for asking one other follow-up question, but can you talk to any possible deed restriction that would be as part of this conveyance?
Mr. Brugge?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council members, the deed restriction is a 30-year maximum restriction. And so we can look at other ways to ensure that there is certainty around the future. The most likely method would be through some sort of a zoning change from what it is currently. I think the biggest assurance that you have, again, is having Three Rivers as the owner, and the mission of the organization assures it will stay some sort of green space. But in terms of its use, the deed restriction is a 30-year max.
So, Council, I think just in general, the only decision we're making tonight is whether or not we want staff to continue moving on this and if we want to hold a public hearing on it on February 26th. And frankly, I think it's a no-brainer to continue this conversation. And it's definitely a conversation worth having, however it turns out, but it's definitely a conversation worth having. So if anybody would like to make the motion on this?
I'll make the motion. I'll put it forward. Let's see here what we got here. So we can keep this thing moving here. All right. So I'll move to direct staff to hold a public hearing on February 26, 2024 to seek input from residents and golfers regarding the City of Bloomington's possible transfer of ownership conveyance of the Hyland Greens Golf Course property to the Three Rivers Park District.
Motion by Councilmember Lohman, second by Councilmember D'Alessandro to direct staff to hold a public hearing on February 26th on this issue of the conveyance of Hyland Greens Golf Course. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-1 with Councilmember Lohman in opposition. Very good. Looking forward to the conversation on the 26th.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members.
Thank you. Item 5.3 on our agenda. This is discussion, the draft proposal for the speed limits on the larger city-operated roadways for a larger roadway speed limit. Mr. Roberts, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. If I can just get that presentation up, we'll start. All right. Some history on this. Prior to 2019, the state of Minnesota reserved the authority for setting speed limits on all roads in the state. And so no agency was allowed to set their own speed limits, and that's what Bloomington has operated under throughout its history. A legislative change occurred in 2019. Minnesota cities could now set their own speed limits. That authority did not apply to counties, which is a bit unusual because, as most of you know, most of the north-south roads in the city of Bloomington are under county authority. This is Bush Lake Road, Normandale, France, Penn, Nicollet. And so what we're talking about tonight is not those roads. They might eventually get that authority, but they do not have it right now. So in September of last year, the city council approved a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit for local streets. These are local residential streets in the city, and that is the way that we'll let people know about that is we won't post signs on each of these streets. It'll just be signs posted at the entryway saying the default speed limit in the city of Bloomington is 25 miles an hour unless otherwise posted. The council approved that change, and so tonight we're going to talk about those other, unless otherwise posted roadways. So the current speed limits, as I said, were set by the state. In general, the city roadways, I have posted speed limits of 30 miles an hour up to about 40 miles an hour on some of our larger arterial roads. Some of the county roads do go up to 45 miles an hour, but that, again, that's not changing right now. After the council made its decision in September and October, we posted the attached, the map you're seeing here, out to the public to receive comments. This is a draft proposal of a set of speed limits, 25 miles an hour up to 35 miles an hour for city streets on the larger arterials. I'm going to go through quickly the methodology that I use to think about that, but starting with looking at a roadway, its typical access, its speeds, volume, and capacity, and how that all relates. So local roads, neighborhood streets, largely unrestricted access. You have driveways pretty much continuously on any kind of local street. They have the highest level of access of any roadway, the lowest speeds, and obviously the lowest capacity. These are, typically roads that you can expect bicyclists and pedestrians at any time, anywhere on those roadways. With that set at 25 miles an hour, you move up to your collector streets. These are the majority of the larger streets in Bloomington. 102nd Street that we talked about earlier, we heard some feedback earlier, 106th Street, Xerxes Avenue. These are larger roads. They generally include pedestrian accommodations in terms of sidewalks, not always, but we generally try to include those. Bikes are frequently seen on these streets, and in fact, most of our bike network is on the collector street system. So you can expect to see bicyclists sharing the road with cars, pedestrians, obviously cross these streets and our presence on them as well. So moving up to arterials, this is 98th Street, Lyndale Avenue, and American Boulevard, the largest streets in the city. They have driveways, they have access, but we try to restrict that. We try to limit the number of driveways to maintain that capacity, maintain the safety of these roadways. Generally, you always want to see facilities for bikes and pedestrians, hopefully separate from traffic, but bicyclists do use the arterial system, pedestrians cross, and they're, again, always a presence. And then at the upper extreme, you have the highway system where access is severely limited and speeds are just very high. So we don't have to deal with those, thankfully. So looking at this, we have this nice linear transition through the classification system. The highest speed, currently on our system now, the highest speed on a city arterial is 40 miles an hour. I'm proposing to cap that out at 35 miles an hour. There's a couple things that bear into that. One of the things that we all know intuitively is speed. Speed always increases problems. In terms of crashes, it always increases the severity, and this is most acute when you're talking about non-motorized users. It does not increase linearly, it increases exponentially, the harm that a crash occurs to pedestrians, and that gets very significant between 30 and 35 miles an hour. Above 35 miles an hour, it's a significant issue, and it reaches an inflection point there. So you're dramatically increasing the severity of crashes you have, and you're not really doing much for mobility. You're not increasing mobility over 35 miles an hour. The increment, the travel time at 35 miles an hour is not significantly greater than it is at 40 miles an hour. You're just increasing the risk to your non-motorized population. And so the trend, for obvious reasons, is for an urban area where bikes and pedestrians are always present, is to cap those speeds up around 35 miles an hour. So, running through what's proposed, the first category are access roads. These are roads that we have some wonderful recreational amenities in the city. Those are generally regional facilities. These are roads that lead to those regional facilities. This is Lower Lyndale down to the River Valley, Old Cedar Avenue down to the bridge, 34th, things like that. These are roads where they're frequently, they have dramatic changes in terms of traffic volumes throughout the seasons, depending on the time of year, but they're also very well used by pedestrians, cyclists. they're also used by visitors from outside of the city. And so I think a 25-mile-an-hour posted speed limit is suitable on those roads. The one exception is that West Bush Lake Road, it leads to a park, but it's also a very narrow and circuitous road. It looks like a cart path that sort of evolved through time, and it is technically a collector street, but I think it's better at 25 miles an hour posted over the 30 that the rest of the collector streets are. Talked about the collector street system. This is the majority of the roadways. Most of them are already at 30 miles an hour posted. My aim here is to make them all 30 miles an hour posted for consistency. So again, 102nd Street branch to Normandale that we heard about earlier tonight, that will go from 35 to 30, joining the majority of collector streets in the roadway in the system. The only, there's a couple exceptions, Highwood Drive and Bloomington Ferry, I'm proposing to keep at 35, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Moving up to the arterial system, most of these are currently at 35 to 40 miles an hour. I'm proposing to cap them all at 40 miles or 35 miles an hour, with a couple exceptions. American Boulevard between Old Cedar Avenue and Portland is one of the highest pedestrian areas in the city. Significant pedestrian use. Heavy transit use. There's 2 bus rapid transit lines that run through here, and there's a lot of those pedestrians crossing the road. Given the presence of pedestrians in those volumes, I think this roadway is better set to keep at 30 miles an hour through this segment. The other one is Lyndale, and Lyndale, you know, has evolved through time, and it acts as an arterial, carries about 20,000 plus cars a day, very significant volumes, but it looks by and large like a collector, lots of driveways. It's also an area that we're targeting for a lot of redevelopment, a lot of pedestrian activity we want to foster. Because of the characteristics of that roadway, I think it is better kept at 30 miles an hour instead of 35. As part of the analysis I did, we looked at the existing speeds and how people are driving the roads right now. As most of you know, the speed limit is only one bit of information drivers use when they're selecting their speed. They are heavily influenced by things like weather, roadway characteristics. Roadway characteristics are one of the strongest factors that will influence driver behavior, and this is where the engineering comes into play. What you see here in yellow are roads where the existing speeds, the way a majority of drivers are driving the road, are 5 to 8 miles an hour above what we're proposing as a speed limit. So they're going a little fast. The red is where they're 10 miles an hour above the proposed limit. And so this map looks like a lot of red and yellow, but there's also a lot of roads that are actually working pretty well. American Boulevard, for instance, drivers are driving that about where we want them to. The road seems to not have a problem with speed. There's some segments that we'll deal with. The segment between France Avenue and Normandale Boulevard, that goes to a 3-lane section with the MnDOT work, and so we expect speeds to moderate. My point to this, though, is we need to do, this is a snapshot in time. When we update the speed limits, we'll come back and see how this has changed based on the speed limits. More importantly, is this gives us something to work towards as we develop our capital projects and our projects that we're seeking funding in the future, so that we can redesign those roadways, we can incorporate those elements that we know will get those speeds where we want them. So the example I'm going to use is Lower Lyndale. That's being rebuilt this summer. You can see right now people are really zipping down that hill towards the river bottoms there. We're going to incorporate elements that we know manage speeds better to bring those speeds within that 25 miles an hour posted for that roadway. A couple other examples. We are seeking funding right now for some crossing improvements of Auto Club Drive. That road is so aptly named. It is broad and people drive down it very quickly. We're incorporating some crossing improvements that will also manage traffic speeds. 86th Street, we talked about that earlier with the parks. Those pedestrian refuge islands in the center, that make that crossing so much safer for pedestrians will also manage speeds along 86th Street. So this gives us a long-term plan to start addressing speeds as part of our design, part of our projects. And that leads me to the last set of roads, Hyland Drive and Bloomington Ferry. These are late additions to the city. They were built much later. They are wide, and people are really moving. We have plans for those roads in the future, but until then, just changing the speed limit on those roads isn't going to do much good. And they're probably going to be okay at the higher speeds until we can get to them. The council's already asked the staff to study Bloomington Ferry, and we're starting that work. Highwood Drive, we put in some funding applications for crossing improvements to try to bring that down. But for right now, to retain our credibility, we don't want to put speed limits out there that people are just going to ignore. I think changing the speeds on these roads would probably have that effect. And so we're proposing just to leave those alone until we can study them, do other projects to bring those speeds into a line where we'd like for collector streets, and then those would go eventually to 30 miles an hour. Couple things about the implementation. So we are in January. We've got to get this through Planning Commission. We're also working on code revisions with the legal department, coming up with final designs, getting those entryway signs designed and built. The big effort is going to be in the spring. It's sort of strange to feel this way right now, but usually this time of year the ground is frozen, we're covered in snow, and we don't want to do much signage work. And so as the ground thaws in April, we'll go ahead and install those signs. We're also planning a large information outreach and engagement effort that I'll talk about in just a minute. But the big effort, the big public-facing efforts are going to take place in the spring. A couple code changes. This is a bit dry, but we're intending to go forward with a official map that would keep in engineering for our code changes. The big push is awareness, to raise awareness. We're going to do that through, the council's already approved as part of the neighborhood traffic management work, approved the addition of radar signs, the fixed radar signs. We're going to be asking for some additional money from council to deploy a couple more of the radar trailers that the police run around with all summer, and really raise driver awareness about their speeds and what the posted speed is. This has good results. So, pretty straightforward on the budget here. One of the things that is expensive about this process, if we do it right, is updating our signal timing. This is especially effective for speed management along corridors like Lyndale. As you progress from signal to signal, if you're rapidly out of the signal and you're next one you're stopping at red, but just for a few seconds, you quickly start to realize you're going too fast on that corridor. And so we time those signals along a corridor how we want people to drive with respect to speed. And so we're proposing money to do that this year and over the next 3 years to really make that effective on those arterials. That's one of the reasons American Boulevard doesn't have the speeding problems you've seen, is because we work really hard to keep that signal timing up to date as you progress east to west across the city. Looking for some money for the police to spend that extra time to go deploy those trailers, work in the community and raise awareness. We're asking for a couple of radar trailers for them. And then also some money to do some communication and education strategies with our communications department. That's it. Looking for discussion, feedback, and thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Council, discussion, feedback, thoughts. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier in our listening session, a couple of people came and spoke about 102nd, and then I noted that I think that was red on there, so it seemed to fit their description and concerns there. So I think that is a priority location to take a look at and take a look at. We talked about school zones and things like that. I think that's on the radar. The other one that I saw in there, Nesbitt, that's one that I get a lot of feedback on. I know you're familiar with the area, so the portion of it between Old Shakopee and up to 102nd is, in my mind, very residential. I mean, it's mostly driveways and things like that. I mean, once you get to the golf course and then go north of that, you got school and a couple churches and things like that where it kind of makes sense. But that is one of the areas that I hear most often about cut-through traffic because people want to avoid the light at Normandale and Old Shakopee and getting stuck in that. So they go through that neighborhood. And so that is one I'd actually, I'd love your opinion on if that portion of it treated as residential at the 25 makes any sense, and what challenges that may pose as well. So, and then my last question, is it all right if I just give you all the questions? Sure. Okay. So last time we talked about this stuff, I was like, oh, can we ever put fixed signs with the flashing when you're speeding? And wouldn't you know it, we have one. So Poplar Bridge Road. So I just happened to drive past it. I was like, oh, we have one of those. So, but I think the trailers make more sense because we can move them around a lot easier. So I'm glad to see that in there because I do think from the information we had previously that those are effective at reminding people of it, especially as we roll out changes to put that reminder in front of them in key spots, I think is important.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nelson, so Nesbitt's one that I'm familiar with. That I'm in that neighborhood, and so it was originally a 4-lane roadway that we converted down to 2 lanes, and it's got very wide shoulders, and so it has the feeling of being very broad and open. And there's that lovely golf course, minus the fence. I grant you that along there, and so speeds are significant in that area. And a couple thoughts on that and the idea of converting it to a residential street at 25 miles an hour. I think instead, and one of the reasons I would support keeping that at a higher speed limit is if there's no time advantage to going out there, what's to stop people from just heading up Colorado Road, which borders the edge of the park and makes a fairly continuous route. And so the reason we want to keep a little bit of incentive on those collector and arterial roadways, in so doing, keep people out of the neighborhoods for those longer through trips. And so that would be a problem with converting that to 25 miles an hour, is you've taken away any time advantage. And so then my neighbors are going to be calling me and wondering why there's all the people coming through. The trick with Nesbitt, though, is we clearly need to modify that. The engineering is wrong for what we're asking people to do. It's just too broad. The intersection, the always stop there at 102nd and Nesbitt is so poorly complied with. There's plenty of room to do a roundabout, and we might get some new fencing in there as part of that project. And so the same at 102nd Street, Nesbitt and 98th Street. It's a very broad, wide intersection, always stop. Some of those options could be done, as well as just sort of reducing the width of the road, bringing in those curb lines. Now, I'm not saying we rush out there and develop a project to do that, but if we incorporate projects like that with PMP that are specifically targeted to speed management, that's the way we gain the best bang for the buck for those.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple comments. First off, thank you very much. I feel like this has been a very comprehensive project across multiple aspects of traffic management. So thank you for your efforts on that, Mr. Roberts. I think I've learned a lot about it, and I appreciate that we keep coming back to these other things that we've also done so that we can start to see how they layer on top of each other to become most effective. I think your proposals are great. I don't know what the next steps might be here, but I think people have told us time and time again, even people who don't agree with me on most things, that this is something we can agree on. That safer speeds on our neighborhood streets is a better plan, so I would think that we would have good support for this. I hope that we do. I imagine there's continued opportunities for engagement. And then as far as rolling this out, I think because things have happened in sections, if you will, I don't know if it's a Bloomington like video, if it's a Bloomington briefing article or whatever. But I think kind of tying it all together and saying here's like what we're doing and here's how it's laying out and here's how it affect you. If that map that you mentioned will be kind of the master map, if it's something that can be digitized and you can put in your address and you can see what's happening around you or whatever. I mean, these are all things that we might be able to do to help really give some education on it. But I would love to see us really talk about them in concert with each other, right? The work we're doing around our parks, why are we doing that? The work that we're doing around school zones, why are we doing that? Why are we reducing neighborhood speeds? Why are we reducing, these collector road speeds? And why are we giving traffic the ability to use these other tools, bump outs, rotaries, whatever you want to call them? I grew up on the East Coast. They're called rotaries in my part of the world. Sorry, roundabouts. Those I think that's just a fun conversation to have. That sounds we've equipped the city with a set of tools that coming together really solve a lot of the problems that we've been hearing about for a very, very long time. So thanks everybody for the efforts.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I think you've hit on it. I think the couple things to think about are consistency and then the messaging around the consistency. When I think about consistency, I think about 98th Street, when you get west of Normandale, it goes up from 35 to 45 miles an hour, which I just have never understood. And then when you get to Normandale Community College, it goes up to 45 miles an hour. And then when you get to Normandale Boulevard, it comes back down again. And I think it just makes sense to have a consistent speed limit across wherever you're going, and then have the messaging around it so people can realize it. If they realize, oh, there's a school there, I should be driving 20 miles an hour. Or I'm by a park, oh, I should be slowing down. I'm going into one of our nature areas, I should be slowing down, that kind of thing. So it just becomes a muscle memory kind of thing for people where it makes sense and it's consistent, and then it just kind of clicks in with consistency that's how fast they should be going in that area. So, Councilmember Mua and then Councilmember Rivas. Councilmember Mua.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for bringing this forward. I think for me personally, this was the big piece that I felt was missing from the last proposal. And so I appreciate this, and I think it's going to do a lot to help just make our streets safer, especially as my kids are getting older and they're going to start being more independent and getting out on those roads and riding their bikes with their friends. I think it's going to make a big difference to allow them to do that, because as of right now, I am not comfortable at all seeing kids out there, especially when I get out on the roads during school times when they're getting in or getting out, and it terrifies me to see kids going up and down these streets with how fast cars are going. The thing that I feel is missing is the enforcement piece of it, especially as we roll this out. I want to make sure that we are enforcing these new speed limits so that people know there is a change, and that it's that big show of like, hey, we've made a commitment. We're doing what we said we're going to do to make our streets safer, and we're going to enforce what we've said to really get that change going. Because I think a lot of the other things that we're going to implement are going to take time, but it's that enforcement piece that I'd like to see as we plan through implementing these changes.
Councilmember Mua, that's a good point. And unfortunately, they don't let me write tickets, to my dismay. And so, but I do defer to the chief there if questions on enforcement and how they can make that work happen. So I appreciate that feedback.
I completely agree, Councilmember Mua. There needs to be enforcement on top of the engineering, on top of the education, on top of all the other pieces of it. But it can't just be one of those. I think it needs to be all of those working together. Councilmember Rivas. Your microphone, please, Councilmember. Your council member.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Sorry about that. I always forget that. I think I speak loud enough, but I don't. So, thanks. I echo the thoughts Councilmember Zhao has. The only question I have is 98th Kennedy High School. I mean, I don't know how we don't have accidents there every day, every morning and every afternoon. It's incredible how fast people drive in that section there, even when the cars are trying to come out of a high school. It's just incredible. I live just a couple of blocks from there, and it's amazing. How soon is the plan to put up signs that it's in a school zone that you should be driving at 20 or 25 miles an hour? That's the only question I have really, because it is crazy there.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Rivas, that's a good point. And Kennedy is unique and is surrounded by county roads. Old Shakopee Road in that area is the county, as well as the north-south. Nicollet, and so we can't change the speed limits on those roads. But to the point about school zones, we have reached out to the county. They are supportive of that, and so we are doing the application right now to look at implementing the school zone speed limits around all of our public schools, including on the county roads around Kennedy. So yeah, that work is moving forward. I don't have a specific timeline for you. We're just doing the application to get the money to do that right now, but the county is in agreement, and they've sort of given us the okay to advance our ideas on that. And one of the issues that we get, it's even more acute than like on 102nd Street, is those are both arterial roadways. Those are large arterials. To put up the standard 20 miles an hour when students are present signs will have almost no effect. Unless you have the police out there continuously, those signs won't have any effect. And so we're looking at, can we do some flashers? School zone at 20 miles an hour when these lights are flashing, all the way up to variable speed limit signs like you see on Interstate 80 through Wyoming, to where we can actually change the speed limits during those school times. And so we're looking at a raft of options that, yep, are going to cost a little more and they're going to take a little more time to do, but they'll be effective. So,
Well, thank you.
So, Mr. Roberts, so next up is some code revisions and legal work and getting all kinds of public feedback, and we'll see you again sometime in early to mid-March. Is that correct?
that's the plan so far. Yep, we'll go through Planning Commission, and then we'll be back here to look for adoption. So,
very good.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you much. Council item 5.4 on our agenda is a discussion of our 2024 legislative policies. Mr. Sable. Good evening.
Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. Mike Sable, Assistant City Manager. I was planning on doing this at 10:30 or quarter to 11, so this is a lovely surprise. So the legislative session is coming upon us on February 12th. We kick off. It will end this year on May 20th, so a very short window of time. The legislative session has historically been one of these items that Bloomington has long enjoyed a really robust partnership and relationship with its legislators. It's always worked in concert, and this year is no different. I inherited this policy document from previous staff, and one of the pieces of feedback that we've heard consistently from legislators and lobbyists is, we love your robust legislative program, and you've got to find a way to make it simpler for us to read and understand what you're looking for. And so this year it was the first variation of trying to make what was once a 6-page request document into a smaller piece of a more refined asks, but then also having more supplemental material, because we do have these long-standing relationships and partnerships with the League of Minnesota Cities, with Metro Cities, and the Municipal Legislative Commission. And so while we are by design creatures of the state, and so it's important that we have a robust presence at the legislature, but this year is an attempt to make that a little bit shorter and briefer and more concise so that people know exactly what we're looking for. One of the things that I think you all participated in was a legislative breakfast that we had with area legislators earlier this month, where they got to talk about what the things that we had hoped to achieve as part of a legislative session, but more importantly to also hear their perspectives on sort of what was possible. And so what's before you tonight is looking for adoption of the legislative policies as drafted. And then also know that as issues come up at the legislature, and just to give you some context, there were 3,069 bills offered last year. And so I don't know that we'll reach the same number this year, but in the legislative session there is also opportunity for mid-course corrections. And so if you make an approval or adoption of the legislative program today, it is always editable because the world changes and the legislature is often different. And so what's before you today is sort of a legislative program that identifies the priorities really around key areas that cities work in, and primarily, bonding requests tend to be the most high-profile items because they tend to have the biggest line item or the most numbers of zeros. And so I don't have any other information other than I think folks have had a chance to look at it. We certainly have opportunity to edit and revise, but we think that this gives us a really clear way to communicate to our legislators the priorities of Bloomington, and then set us up for success when, as circumstances warrant, that we can adapt and adjust on the fly. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sable. And I appreciate that. And I think we talked about it, I think, at the legislative breakfast, the whole notion of basically if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And I think there is no better example of that unless just simply look at the League of Minnesota Cities priorities. There's got to be 250 priorities there. And I understand that they're a little different scale than what we are, but I think it's a good example between. So I applaud narrowing our focus down and our scope down a bit to focus in a little bit better and have a little bit more directed and concentrated message and effort that we're working on, knowing full well that if we ever wanted to expand, we've got those 250 policies that we are officially part of because of our association with the League of Cities, and those extra, I think there was 125 for the metro cities and probably about 80 or so from the MLC. We're covered. Basically, we're covered in a lot of things, and it gives us, this document gives us focus. Those other documents give us flexibility and room to grow, and I think it's, an effective way to take a look at our legislative priorities for the coming year. Council, any questions, comments on this? Councilmember Mua?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I had the honor and the privilege to host our bonding tour when they came to Bloomington. Hosted Senator Pappas as they came through and speak to the projects that we are putting forth for bonding. I just appreciate having that opportunity, and I hope we convince them that we matter and investing in our future is good for the region, not just for Bloomington.
And Councilmember Moore, I wanted to thank you for pinch hitting for me on that tour. I appreciate that you stepped up. I know it was into the evening, and I know it gets late, especially as they arrive. Generally not on time, but appreciate you that you were there and represented Bloomington so well. So thank you so very much for doing that. Councilmember Lohman.
I think the only thing, it's just two things. It's just a process piece, and I don't want to get in that today. I mentioned that and I know that Councilmember D'Alessandro had brought that up earlier. Trying to find a better way to make sure that we're approving this stuff prior to, given all the other circumstances. And the other piece, it'd be nice to have a copy of the previous stuff to see what dropped off and what's no longer there anymore. Because I know that there was a number of policies that were put forward that I know I had, and then past other council members that had on there. That's kind of my record to kind of keep track of that. So it's nice to have that red line copy of what we got rid of.
And I agree, Councilmember, regarding getting these earlier. We could have this discussion in November or December, although those meetings are awfully full. But I think it would be worthwhile discussion just to take a look at them and noodle through them a bit with the council.
And I know it's tough. And the reason why the reason why I say it's tough is that we have new council members, so it's kind of tricky. So you take that. I mean, so it's kind of one hand on this hand. So, but yeah, no, I wish we could get it earlier.
Yep, agreed. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just got a few items. Under public safety, and I don't know what opportunities there are. I just know one of the issues we've spoken about multiple times is the conversion of our fire department and the costs of that, and if there are opportunities to see if there's support somewhere in the legislature for that. We've been trying to figure out how we're going to balance all that come 2026, and that may be more federal money anyways. So again, I don't know if there's opportunities there, but that would be a priority that I would put in there. For housing and economic development, I really like the first one there, that you have that incentivizes, provides and rewards cities that are doing a good job. My only caveat, and I think it's kind of within there, is I think those incentives should go to those cities that are working hard to reduce the cost to build this so that the subsidies can go further. I mean, the state focused a lot of, and they set up a new sales tax for housing. So they put a lot into subsidy and would like to see them do more on reducing the overall cost. I mean, several decades ago, you didn't have to subsidize housing that people could afford, and now, we do. And then the last part, this is just a request. I know we support some of the policies of the League of Minnesota Cities, Metro Cities, MLC, all of that. If there's anything significant that you feel that would merit a conversation with the council further from their policies, because I do think there are some things that we do that are different than other cities. And I would just ask that you bring those forward if they're getting traction in the legislature, just to get our feedback and not just give a blanket carte blanche, we're going to support the League of Minnesota Cities. I think the city manager may know where I would probably not want to do that, but that's not the only area. And so I just ask you, please use your discretion to bring those items back to the council and let us have that conversation just to make sure. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I will say that has happened in the past, and I would expect it would continue to happen in the future. If there's anything significant, we'll have the discussion. Any other comments, Council?
Mayor, if I may, just a couple of points around process. So there are two committee deadlines at the legislature that are really critical. One is March 22nd is where the policy bills have to have had a hearing in the committee. So that is for us a key deadline date. And so what I think we can do from the staff side is schedule a legislative update in advance of the committee policy deadline. And then on also April 19th is the finance bills committee deadline. The odds have been heard. And so I think what we can do is, looking at city managers, put two placeholders for meeting in this body in advance of both of those dates. I think that provides a good check-in, and two, timely with the deadlines at the legislature, because there's a lot of moving parts and they build their calendars well in advance as well. So thank you.
Councilmember D'Alessandro?
A quick question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, so don't feel bad if you don't. But are the budget, because of the budget process last year, are the bonding dollars already allocated at a top line as it is today, so that we know like housing has this much to allocate, transportation has this much to allocate, or whatever, or is it all like, how do they reconcile how much they know they can work with, I guess is what I'm asking more than anything.
The answer is not much. Mr. Verbrugge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Councilmember D'Alessandro, each session is its own standalone. So the bonding authority from last year doesn't really have anything to do for this year. So, you saw the governor put forward his proposal for what bonding would look like. I think it was in the neighborhood of $800 million. $960, thank you. Unfortunately, only $40 million for local projects. And a reminder that the governor doesn't write the bill, right? So the legislators write the bill, and they'll have their negotiations about what that number is going to be. So when you see these initial proposals, just remember they are all initial proposals, right? So the negotiations will continue throughout the session, and often you will see a final bonding bill that's more than what people talked about at the beginning, because one of the aphorisms of the legislature is that the bonding bill is what is the glue that ties this stuff together, right? Because so many legislators have interest in funding projects that are dear to them. So, yeah.
Anything else, Council? If not, Council, I would look for a motion to adopt the 2024 legislative policies. Motion by Councilmember D'Alessandro, second by Councilmember Mua to adopt the City of Bloomington 2024 legislative policies. No further council discussion on this. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you much, Mr. Sable. Appreciate it. Item 5.6, or excuse me, 5.5. I jumped ahead. 5.5 is our council secretary appointment. We talked about this a couple weeks back, and now it's come to fruition. Mr. Verbrugge.
Mr. Mayor and council members, we have a new council secretary, Safa Mercer, just joined us, and you met her earlier this evening under our employee introductions. Not much more to say other than we're excited to have Safa in the office and excited to almost let Matt go. We haven't totally gotten our claws out of him as he's doing some last minute training and bringing up to speed. So I think he's going to help co-pilot our subsequent council meeting as well. But Safa will be taking the reins.
Thank you, Mr. Verbrugge. I'm going to speak ahead of the vote because I'm assuming this is a done deal, but I encourage all of you to get to know Safa. Set up a time, come into the office, buy a cup of coffee, but an opportunity to talk to her and talk about what your hopes and expectations are for a council secretary for the council. I'm looking forward to working with her. We've had a very pleasant couple of weeks together already, and looking forward to having her work with the rest of the council as well and giving you the opportunity to work with her as well. So, we officially need to appoint her as council secretary. So, council, I will make a motion to appoint Safa Mercer as secretary to the city council effective 1/29/2024. Second. We've got a motion and a second by Councilmember Mua to appoint Safa Mercer as secretary to the city council. No further council discussion on this? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Welcome aboard. Our final agenda item of the evening is item 5.6, our City Council Policy and Issue Update. We had a listening session earlier this evening, and it was a busy one. We had a lot of folks stopping by. Ms. Ness came in and talked about a 2019 civil case between herself and the City of Bloomington. We had two parents talk about the traffic on 102nd Street. Shauna Swanson and Anita Smithson came in with concerns about the speed of traffic, as we just talked about. They offered suggestions for traffic calming measures. They want to formally institute school zones. They want reduced speed limits. They want crosswalks. It was a good discussion, and it fed very nicely, I think, into a couple of the discussions we had this evening at our regular meeting. Peter Bergerson spoke in opposition to our organics program and to changes to curbside cleanup and to the pay-as-you-throw plan that the city that he described as the city is working on. Janine Hudson spoke, and she asked about the possibility to correct background check information dated from November of last year that she claimed contained incorrect information. And Mr. Robert Coleman, who spoke a couple of times this evening, also spoke at our listening session, and we had a good conversation about transit and the shortcomings of public transit in Bloomington, just in general, in particular with our east-west routes, but also with the north-south routes as well. The one other thing that I wanted to mention, Council, a couple of weeks back, I had the opportunity to attend the U.S. Conference of Mayors annual meeting in Washington, D.C. This is the first time that I've attended a Conference of Mayors meeting. The first couple of years, obviously, it was all COVID all the time, and then the last couple of years, we've been working on, we were working on Expo-related stuff. So I hadn't been involved with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, despite some heavy lobbying by a few folks that they thought Bloomington should be involved in the U.S. conference, especially by our neighbor to the south, the mayor of Burnsville, who was the former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, really wanted to see Bloomington involved. And so took advantage of the opportunity, went out there. Mr. Verbrugge and I were there, and I had some outstanding discussions, saw some outstanding presentations on different items, a variety of different things that were applicable to Bloomington in a variety of different ways. Saw some interesting speakers. It's a good thing about the U.S. Conference of Mayors is that they command the attention of the administration. So we heard from Secretary Buttigieg. We heard from the Secretary of who else do we hear from? Transportation.
Secretary Blinken. No.
The Secretary of State Blinken.
Vice President Harris.
Vice President Harris had a chance to hear from went to the White House and heard from the president about all kinds of things. So it was worthwhile, and I do think from a standpoint of what the city of Bloomington should be involved with, I think the U.S. Conference of Mayors is one of those things. I know we haven't been involved in the past, but given the status and the stature of Bloomington in the state of Minnesota and our growing stature nationally and internationally in terms of economic development, it's something that I would, if you would be willing to allow me to, I'd like to continue, because I think it's something that would be very important and beneficial to Bloomington in the long run. So it was definitely worthwhile. Mr. Verbrugge.
Nothing additional, Mr. Mayor.
Nothing? Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on a number of emails that I received, and I'm sure you all received, regarding a memorial over at Dred Scott by the basketball courts. And I guess my request would be if there's interest in taking a look at that policy that led to the removal of the memorial, to see if there's a way to either maintain that or clarify for people, in what circumstances things might be removed, what's our process for family notification and contact and things like that, and have that, because I do think, there are circumstances where changes in a park is certainly going to necessitate that something memorializing, someone needs to be removed for the changes in the park. In this case, I don't know if that is, the case or not. And so I want to see if we can have a little bit more conversation about that. And I will just say my personal hope would be that we at least consider having an opportunity to put that memorial back where it was, if it fits within the park plan. So.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rivas.
I just want to echo his sentiment in regards to the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do think, I know that the policy itself, we discussed this, I think, prior, with the prior city manager, I believe. We had the conversation regarding monuments and markers in city parks, and we're trying to dig up information. We're trying to get exactly when those changes were made and how they were made in the discussion that did take place. And to be honest, I think there's some confusion as to exactly when the policy did was changed, because I recall a conversation at least 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember I could go back and look and see what I've got. I mean, I still.
I don't keep records that well.
I do keep records that long. I do. I'll go back and look and see what I've got. But I do remember the conversation, and I don't know if we want to go down and have that conversation, but I know one of the concerns that we need to think about as a body is that if we do it for this family, and how are we going to do this for other memorials kind of going forward? And that was one of the things that they we talked about during that period of time, and legal was involved, and now that we've adopted a number of things around our equity and inclusion pieces, I think we need to think about that as we kind of move forward as well. How do we recognize people equally across the time of history? And so Mayor, I don't know. Since we've got such a new council, maybe it does make sense to open it back up and have a look at it. But I just know this is going to be an interesting conversation, given that we're doing it, under the gun, under a circumstance like this. Is not, I would not recommend we do that, but if we want to do it, let's do it then.
Mr. Brugge?
Mr. Mayor, council members, Councilmember Nelson, if the council would like to review it, I would recommend we send it through what would be a normal process and have the Parks Commission evaluate again. To the mayor's point, there have been a couple points in time that we're aware of where this discussion has been had. There's a 2007 policy. The most recent policy related to the memorials was just last summer. So, it's come up several times, and I think that might be the best way to just process a review, is have the commission take a look at it and then bring back some additional discussion for the council if you're interested in doing that. The other thing that I would say is that we are committed to working with family to make sure that we do find an ongoing and respectable way to continue to honor the memory of their son. And that includes the whole court. The funds were donated for the basketball court. It wasn't just for the monument. And as we're remaking the court, I think there are any number of options about how we can do that in a meaningful way. And so we want to continue to have conversation with the family about that, because we certainly recognize that this is a painful incident for them. And we don't want to continue to inflict any hurt on the family. We want to make sure that we come to a resolution that they will feel continues to honor Kirk's memory, and that we feel is reflective of what the community is looking for in the park system.
Councilmember Nelson and then Councilmember D'Alessandro. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor, and just thank you for your comments, City Manager Verbrugge, and I, would expect nothing less of the city, that they want to be respectful in this situation, and I know it's a tough situation, been tough for the family, and so, I appreciate that, and I think the idea of running it through the normal process makes sense. This isn't something we would put back up in February, just due to weather and things like that. So, as it goes through the process, we'll have an opportunity to learn more. I appreciate the history and what was there, and, I think there's a difference between new memorials and existing ones, and I just think right now it's not really clear when we might remove something and under what circumstances, because there's obviously the changes of the park, but significant damage and expenses to the city, what are we liable for paying for? There's a lot of things to think through on this policy, and so I don't want to just sort of knee jerk on this. I want it to be well thought out, because we do have, from my understanding, at least a couple of other similar memorials within the community, and I want to make sure that, we're thinking through all of those and making a considered decision. So thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Councilmember D'Alessandro.
I'll make my comments very brief because they echo a lot of what Councilmember Nelson said. I think that I think a lot about these memorials. We think about how we're dealing with the cemetery, right? And because the cemetery is essentially a set of memorials, that's what it is. And there's usually perpetual maintenance agreements and other things like that you do that. When I got my mom buried at a mausoleum in Altoona, Pennsylvania, I'm not there, but there's an agreement that her thing's going to continue to look good, right? And that's in perpetuity. So if we didn't have something like that here, which it sounds like we didn't, and I believe the policy we changed last summer prevents us from putting memorials in anymore. I think we said we're not doing that anymore. Then I think the only thing that we really have to do is figure out, do we have to go back to do we have an inventory of the ones we have? Do we have contact information for the people that we need to have contact information for? My understanding that this got complicated in part because the family is no longer in Bloomington and it was hard to find them and everything like that. So things got a little bit more complicated even in that process. Part of what I think, if we assume that we're never going to do it, we're not going to do it anymore, then maybe this is even simpler, which is just get the inventory of the existing ones and make sure we have our ducks in a row about who's the contact person, what kind of agreement do we have? If we don't have an agreement, how can we enter into an agreement to maintain it? What is our obligation? What's their obligation, et cetera, and be done with it. And then we would have that inventory and everybody would have a clear understanding of how it works. So, I don't know if that's a good plan, but that seems like it might work well.
That's a good point, Councilmember. Yeah. Councilmember Rivas.
I just want to add a fact to a memorial is just, it can be a piece of rock just that. And we were calling it a monument, right? That's when there is a body underneath. So there's two very distinctive items in there. A memorial, it can be just a wall painted with something just memorizing immortalizing the person or the object, whatever it may be. So in this case, there's no body there, right? It was just a memorial. Okay. It's just that people keep calling it, giving it the other name. So I was just wanted to make that clear.
Appreciate the clarification. Yep. Councilmember Lohman.
Thank you. I want to move to a different topic,
please,
if I could. This Wednesday, there will be we're going to have a meeting at the NOC where they're going to discuss kind of the preliminary conversation around the new, we'll call it the RNAV. We're actually going back to the kind of a process we used to use in the past. And, I had a chance to attend a couple of meetings with that. And, from a standpoint of what I've seen thus far, it looks pretty good for Bloomington. I put the caveat on that anything can change at any moment in time. So I think that we're going to see a little bit of an improvement in our experiences when they go back to the RNAV. And I've always liked the RNAV process when I had that before in terms of how that has impacted Bloomington. And so we'll see what happens this Wednesday when that happens and occurs. And then there's one other opportunity that I wanted to just throw to staff that they offered to both myself and our alternate, but I thought that, and they said that they would be open to it, but offering a tour of the airport facilities. And so I don't know if you know, if we want to just go as a whole group over there. And so then I wanted to throw that back to you, manager, to try to see if that it could be something that could be arranged. So it might just be useful.
Sure. Mr. Mayor and council members, Councilmember Lohman, if other members of the council are interested in doing that, we can certainly help facilitate it. I see interest to do that. So I'll have our staff work on that. Lynn Moore is obviously our primary staff person when it comes to the Noise Oversight Committee. And I'll talk to Lynn and get that ball moving. Mm-hmm.
Anything further, council? If not, we have reached the end of our agenda. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Hearing no further council discussion on this, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. We are adjourned. Thanks much for the discussion tonight, council. Thank you to staff for your work. Thanks to everybody who was here and participated in the meeting. Have a good rest of your week.